welcome members. We're now open and in public session. So in the room with me today, I have Anya Murphy, I have the Vice Chair Kelly Armstrong, I have Andy Allen, and I have Paul Frew. And on Starleaf we have Ciara Ferguson, Mark Durkin, and Stephen Dunn. So I'll move on then to apologies. I have apologies from Fra McCann. Can I also let members know that I need to leave at 11:30 and the Vice Chair will take over the chair again then. Okay, agenda item 3 then is Chairperson's business. Members, as you maybe have heard, one of our members, and he's not here to actually say anything, I wish he was. I know we're going to miss Fra greatly. I hope he is back with us before he does actually finish. Fra has given a lot over the years to this Assembly, and certainly in this committee and the old DSD committee. So we'll maybe then wait until hopefully he will be back to join us before he does go. I don't know if he will, but
he's heading on Monday, I think.
Oh, is he heading on Monday? Well, then I just want to officially put it on the record then that I wish him all the very best in his retirement. I will miss him greatly. The Assembly will miss him also, and he has been a valued member of this Assembly and certainly of this committee and the old DSD committee over the years. Okay, members, then I want to move on to agenda item 4, which is draft minutes. Members, you'll find the draft minutes of the 7th of October 2021 at page 14. Can I then ask our members content to agree the minutes of the 7th of October as drafted?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Moving on then to item agenda 5, which is matters arising. Members, you've been provided a page 22 with a departmental response in relation to its business plan 2020 to 2022. Members, we were concerned about the impact of delays in legislation on certain business areas. The response states there are 3 business areas that have experienced legislative delay, which have impacted business planning, and these are gambling and entertainment licence, private rented sector transformation, and Irish language strategy, and an Ulster language heritage and cultural strategy. However, the position reported on at Q3 has progressed since then, thus reducing the potential impact on progress to transform the private rented sector. Members, any comments or content to note that piece of information? Yeah. What can you say?
That's it.
Okay. Then where am I? I've skipped pages here. Okay, then members, you've been provided a page 24 with a department response in relation to potential legislation still to be brought forward. I know this is something we've been asking for a few weeks now. The executive approved the introduction of the support for mortgage interest, etc., security for loans bill on the 23rd of September. It is a small bill with only 2 clauses, and the committee will be briefed by departmental officials in due course. And then drafting work is continuing on the Social Security Terminal Illness Bill. Subject to ministerial agreement, it is anticipated that committee, executive and assembly support will be sought to progress that bill by way of accelerated passage. And then it is proposed to introduce the Welfare Supplementary Payments Loss of Universal Credit or Housing Benefit Bill, which will provide for the extension of the social sector size criteria mitigation scheme. The executive has previously agreed that the bill should proceed through accelerated passage on that also. Okay, Kelly, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, the terminal illness, I would really like to see the detail on that. Now, I accept that we don't want to delay this because this does cause significant harm and has been causing significant harm for people who have a terminal illness. The social sector size criteria and the universal credit, to be honest, where's the loopholes? You know, this is what my concern is. If this is going through accelerated passage, we'll not get to scrutinise that. I don't want the mitigations, as far as I'm aware, are extended until the end of December. But what about the loopholes? We've been talking about these loopholes, been talking about the 2-child cap and the bedroom tax that's impacting those people who have come forward. Where is that? So if we could write back and say, thanks very much for this list of legislation, however, the glaringly obvious ones are the loophole ones. Where are they at? Because they're impacting families now. Is that intended to be contained in these mitigations legislation? But because we're not able to scrutinise, how do we know? So where's the loopholes?
I know we have a letter in our table papers that goes into a little bit more detail on that, which we will be coming to. But I get where you're coming from there, Andy.
Yeah, Chair, just on that, it's my understanding of the process. There's a requirement for primary legislation in respect of the social sector size criteria, and then the loopholes will be by regulation. So they will come through regulation.
But this is where our problem is, we need this in writing and we'd love to be able to scrutinise it. We don't want to delay. Accelerated passage is not something we ever want to see, but until we see the fine details of this, how do we know how many people are going to be impacted or still impacted?
No, I think the committee has made it very clear, and Mark's waiting to come in, I'll bring him in a wee minute, that accelerated passage is not our choice of how we want to do legislation, but we know for some of it we have little or no choice on that, but it is good to see the details, certainly before that. I'll bring you in, Andy, quickly, and then I'll bring Mark in.
And I suppose, it's unacceptable that we will be asked for accelerated passage in respect to this legislation, especially given that it has been sitting, being requested to go before the executive on so many occasions, and it hasn't come through. So by default of the executive not allowing it to get on the agenda and be approved, we will be asked to approve this by accelerated passage. It could have been done in the time frame for it to come to this committee, had it not been prevented from coming through the executive.
Very true.
Okay, sorry, can I bring in Mark, please?
Thank you, Chair. No, I would share the frustration that other members have expressed there. I mean, it's something we've been going on about since January 2020, and even I'm fairly sure at some stage asked or wondered, was there some mechanism whereby we could see what's in it without it being a formal committee stage, even before this paper went to the executive, so a committee could help shape it and form it, and not just committee, the sector as well, ensure it's as robust a piece of work as possible, given that our hands are going to be tied behind our backs a bit if it's coming through accelerated passage. The other point I was going to make, it was just in terms of, I suppose it's dependent on the success or otherwise of the Minister's bid for the money to fill the hole left by the removal of the universal credit uplift. That'll require a separate piece of legislation again, won't it? Or is there a way it could be part of the welfare supplementary payments legislation?
Hold on, 2 ticks, Mark. Sean, you come in there.
Departmental on this subject later.
Yeah.
Oh, there is, that's right, so there is, yeah. There's a departmental briefing on that later, so we can ask that question, Mark, so we can. On the universal credit uplift.
Yeah, I'm just saying that could, and hopefully will, be another piece of legislation.
Okay. All right.
So I wouldn't tell you with confidence that we'd get to see it, given how long it's taken these to get to where they've got, and they haven't even got there yet.
I'm going to bring in Paul and then Kelly. Paul?
Yeah, just to say, on the table papers, there's a 3-page letter from the Minister explaining all of this. Second paragraph of that, she exclaims that she has been pursuing this tirelessly, and she has asked for the paper to be included on the agenda for the executive meetings on numerous occasions. I'm new to this committee, and you guys might know more than me, but to me that's scant detail, so I would like to know how often has that paper been scheduled to go onto an agenda or try to be on the agenda, and how often has the Minister raised this in any other business, because she states that too. And if you are going to put that in a letter, really we need dates. And there shouldn't be an issue adding that information onto any letter this committee would receive, but just simply saying that she's tried. She may well have done, but prove it by showing us the dates.
Members, we are going to come on to that. So we are, it is here in the brief to talk about that letter as well. So I'll go to it actually as the next item of business. Kelly, did you want to come in?
I was just going to say it's something for us to bear in mind, because we're not able to scrutinise this, and it's going to include accelerated passage. The regulations, I know the officials are probably listening to this, but instead of them being negative resolution, maybe it needs to be affirmative resolution on the regulations, so we can actually scrutinise those.
Okay. All right, members, look, I'm going to go then just to talk about, because you've brought the letter up, I'm going to skip over to that. So you'll find that, where is that, Janice, sorry?
Page 6.
Oh, what is it in my
Table
brief?
papers. The letter is in your table paper.
Table papers,
Page 6.
yeah, page 6 in your table papers. If you can turn to that, I know there's been mention of that. I know that the Minister has asked us to write to the Executive Office. We did that several weeks ago. We wrote to the Executive Office. I know that the mitigations certainly were approved, or else we wouldn't have had the budget for them. They certainly were approved by the Executive, and I'm very confident the loopholes will be as well. I note from the letter, and I know an issue that I actually have with it, is that this is to run, the Minister has asked that these mitigations just continue to run without any end date. I know this committee has been asking for a review since January last year, because the only way to know whether or not we are putting the correct amount of money into the right place is to do a review. At this stage, we don't know that. I think that a 3-year, as it has been, a 3-year ruling, to allow any new minister coming in next time to have a look at this as well. So I think that has been an issue that certainly that I believe has led to the position that we're in now, is the time limit on this, of asking for these to be indefinite, that there be no end date to any to the mitigations. So I'm going to open up for discussion on the letter. I mean, I have no difficulty writing again to the Executive. I agree. I mean, that we shouldn't be in the stage that we're in right now. I agree with that 100%. But it's I know that we have been asking for the review. We only got light of that 2-3 weeks ago, that there was going to be an advisory body, not an independent body looking at it, but an advisory body, which I don't think was good enough either. But I'll open it up for discussion. Anybody want to come in on any of that? Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, Chair, no, and I'm grateful to the Minister for providing the letter of update, but for me it raises more questions than it does answers. You know, the Minister did state in response to the debate Mark Durkin had in relation to UC in an adjournment debate that it was on the agenda, as she's highlighted, but it was a discussion-only paper. You know, why was that? Considering the Minister's highlighted she's tried to have this on the agenda so many times. And just to pick up on Paul's point, the Minister, when she came to this committee a few months ago, did provide dates, so that is within our system somewhere, in relation to many times she requested to have this on. And it'd be useful to know, is that where the blockade is? Is it there's a disagreement within the Executive in relation to the Minister's view of an indefinite period for the mitigations, and is that the blockade? I know the confidentiality around the Executive, but I think it's a shocking state of affairs when we're actually in a position, and I know we're here as a committee to assist and support the Minister, and we've done so in writing to the Executive so many times, requesting that they bring forward this important legislation, but it's a shocking state of affairs that the Minister has actually actively having to ask us to write to the Executive again to ask for this to come forward. It's just appalling, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make comment on this, Kelly?
The issue with all of this really boils down to the fact that DWP have not reviewed universal credit and haven't uplifted the benefits system in order to keep people out of poverty. I'm happy enough if we write back to the Executive and say, get your finger out and get this legislation on the table. Whatever the issues are, get it resolved. We have people who are going to run out of welfare mitigations, and that would be on us not to get that through. But I think that it would be worthwhile writing to Tres Coffee and DWP just to say to them, I know my party's already done that. We've written to her to say, reconsider, reinstate the £20 uplift, but also do a review of universal credit to actually see if it's effective anymore, because as we know, the increase of cost of living is harming people out there, yet the universal credit uplift, or it's gone, but there's no increase in the potential basic rate of universal credit. If we had that, then we wouldn't be thinking about all these mitigations. While Northern Ireland has, I believe, taken the right route in having mitigations because we could and we were able to, and the other devolved nations look at us and go, fair play to us, you have something there that we don't have. It means then that we have to continue to have mitigations because the basic rate of universal credit is just not good enough. I don't really have an issue about the end date, because no matter what legislation comes through, there will be reviews built into it. I would love to know more about the independent panel, what they're going to be doing with this. Will
Advisory panel?
The advisory panel, whenever it's going to come forward, and what it's going to actually do, what's their terms of reference, all of that. But happy enough to write to the Executive, but I think that we need to be going back to DWP and saying, guys, this needs to be reviewed.
Yeah, well, I think we can do that certainly as a committee. Andy?
Sure, just to come back on Kelly's point, and I've no difficulty writing with to DWP, but I think there are two separate issues here. The mitigations that we have are totally separate to an uplift in or an increase in universal credit. You know, one of the substantive mitigations we have is social sector size criteria, and that is purely down to our failure to build enough an adequate level of social homes for people. And I do not believe that we can punish or penalise people within our society for the fact that this government, all of us collectively, have not built enough homes for people across our society.
Yeah. No, good point. Paul?
Yeah, I have no problems writing to the executive, although the committee's probably getting into a political realm where we probably don't have a remit. So what you might want to add on to that letter is the fact around the practicalities of us actually doing our job, scrutiny. And that would be where our pressure would be and our worries would be, because this could be the worst piece of legislation out ever in the history of Northern Ireland, so we have to be careful of that. So we can push for something, but it's more in a practical sense of how this committee can do its job in scrutiny. And if we're right to the executive, I think we warn them that we're running out of time.
Thanks. Paul. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. I no problem writing to the executive a slight concern, in terms of the end date piece. Now I'm supportive of the Minister's position, but it's the first time that we've heard or got an inkling that this is why there was a blockage, or where the issue was. And while there are confidentiality issues, of course, around the executive, I think it's fair and appropriate if we're being asked to write to the executive by the Minister in support of something, that she should be fully transparent with us in terms of what she's getting back as to why the executive, or maybe other parties, or an other party in the executive, has an issue with what she's seeking to do.
I don't know, is that not having any end date then a change in legislation? Because is it not a 3-year at the moment? I don't know if somebody could remind me on that. I can't remember. I should know that. That it every 3 years that this is.
It's been extended at the moment.
I know it is extended because it fell during whenever the Assembly was down. I mean,
it's been extended since.
It has, and I mean, I don't think that there's nobody and no party, to my best of my knowledge, that wants to see us in this position. No. I mean, we want to get this, and we want to give people that security, and we don't want that cliff edge. Absolutely, we don't want that cliff edge. But do we think that this is the way to go, and this is the best use? When we have other mitigations there that we barely talk about, that it costs us next to nothing to do. And how successful have they been? We don't know. The purse to wallet, remember that campaign at the time, and the position on that. I have heard that has not been successful in any way. Does more need to be done to be put into that, and other stuff that really doesn't cost us a great deal of money, that happens through the welfare mitigations. But I mean, so it's things like that concern me, because we haven't had a review in this in such a long time. Go ahead, Andy. Yeah,
my understanding of where we are presently is the ability to pay the welfare mitigations is through a technical accounting arrangement through the budget. But if for example, and I agree with Mark's point about the Minister, obviously, whether in confidence or in a closed session or whatever it may be, I'd prefer to be in an open session publicly, but I appreciate the confidence around the executive is to articulate to us what is the issue. Is that the issue, the indefinite nature, and is there a workaround there? Is there the ability through regulation by virtue of affirmative resolution to the Assembly to work around that? So there's a conversation to be had there. The important thing is, whilst we continue to debate and argue behind the scenes, there are people out there in our society who are continuing to be impacted by this day and daily. And we don't need to be reminded of the increasing cost of living, the cost of energy, etc., which is going to further push those people into hardship.
Yeah. I agree 100%. As I said, I don't think there's anybody around this table that doesn't, that is against anybody receiving anything through these mitigations, because we all agree with that. It's something that we agreed to several years ago, and we're still in agreement. So I think we just need more detail. There's been several questions that have been asked around the table there, But I do, like, I mean, I 100%, let's write to the executive again. I have no difficulty with that whatsoever, because there needs to be a decision made on this, and it needs to be made pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to make any comment, or are they happy that we move on from that issue now? Okay, Janice, have we time to go back and go over the other matters arising? Do you think? Yeah.
Can I raise one
Yeah.
issue?
Yes, Paul.
I'm sorry, Paul, did you want to come in
No,
on
just
that
matters
issue?
arising. No.
Oh, hold on, well, I've got to go through all the matters arising then, so I'm going back then. Tell me where I am.
Page 7.
We finished page, no,
No,
okay.
back to page 7.
Yeah.
Inform members have been provided at
Yeah.
page 26. This is also about welfare.
Yes, it's about
affairs.
welfare reform as well. So page 26, you'll see the department's or departmental response in relation to the review, as we were talking about there. As the department's branch responsible for welfare mitigations policy and legislation also has responsibility for the preparation and introduction of all social security legislation. This has continued to the delay in launching the welfare mitigations review as the pandemic necessitated, I can't even say that, say that for me something.
Skip over it.
Yeah, it was necessary for a raft of emergency legislation. Oh, goodness. Where am I? There we are. The terms of reference will be considered and formally agreed at the first meeting of the independent panel. It's not an independent panel, and a copy will be forwarded to the committee thereafter. Kelly?
I have a little bit of a concern on this. I believe that the welfare mitigations that we currently have run out in December. So what's the timescale? I know that we're going to find out about the terms of reference after that committee has, or after they have met. What's the timescales, if we can even get that? Because is there going to be a gap?
Yeah,
You
okay,
know.
we can ask that.
Well, can we ask that as
Yeah.
well? If, for whatever reason, this legislation hasn't come forward, can it be extended through the technical accounting arrangement again? That would be an unacceptable situation again to extend it in that manner, but can it be?
Okay, I'll ask those questions. Anybody else want to come in on that? No, and the word was necessitated, by the way.
Never use that word again.
No, don't put that in. Don't put that in again. Okay, members, can turn then to page 28, where you'll see a response from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive in relation to leasehold properties. The Housing Executive Board has discussed the issue in the past and has acknowledged the difficulties that can be generated by short lease periods. The Board is in the process of preparing a modified arrangement, and a fuller response will be sent as soon as the details are available. I know we had a party meeting, one of our updates with the Housing Executive yesterday, and we talked about leasehold properties and, you know, the difficulty people have in selling their properties if there's so they have, and any new properties now that they are selling or have in the very recent past, because I know they can't do it now, have been going with a 125-year lease. So I think it's just, if Paul can correct me, he was on the meeting too, they were just waiting for some legal stuff to be tidied up, and then though in saying that, and it might be worth just asking further on this, or them sending us the information when they get it, there will be a cost to those people who own those properties to get a further extension. I think they mentioned in and around £2,000, was it? I could be wrong on that, but that's just from the meeting yesterday for people to have that extended. And I know people are having difficulties, getting mortgages or selling their homes because of this issue. Andy, you want to come in?
Sure. They didn't indicate to yourselves yesterday or through any correspondence of a time frame, because I know this has been with them for some time. I know we raised it quite a number of months back, and again the cogs in the system of government don't tend to work very fast, so I'd be keen to see this done sooner rather than later.
They had indicated, because one of our Gregory had actually asked that question, and they had said that they're looking within the next few weeks, but certainly before the end of this calendar year, so certainly before the end of the year. So we'll wait and see on that. We'll maybe then, if we could write back to them and ask them, could they furnish us with the full details as soon as they finalise it. Is that okay? Yeah.
Chair,
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
could I just say that the members have now been emailed that timeline that was referred to
Okay.
earlier that we received about the number of times the Minister had put the matter on the...
Okay, that has been
Executive
emailed to
agenda.
members again. Okay, that's grand, thank you. Okay, can we move on then to page 29, where you'll see a response from the Department for Justice in relation to the transfer of functions order. At our meeting on the 16th of September, we considered correspondence from the Department regarding the transfer of the Appeals Service and Rent Assessment Panel to the Department of Justice from the 1st of April 2022. The committee requested that the Appeals Service consider the use of venues other than courthouses for conducting appeals. The response states that prior to the onset of the pandemic, the Appeals Service arranged hearings in 35 different locations across Northern Ireland, of which 13 were courthouses. Appeals are heard in both public and private sector venues across NI and subject to the facilities available in each area, the specific needs of individuals and value for money. Departmental officials are currently engaging with councils to see if any of their venues are suitable for holding tribunal hearings, and the Appeals Service also offers oral hearings via video link and telephone hearings. Kelly.
Just going to say, could we possibly share this letter with the people who are doing the disability strategy within the department to ask them what they think about that? Because I will maintain the position that people who are appealing a benefit are not, they haven't done anything wrong.
Criminals.
And taking them through a court makes it, even though they're not going to court, they're not going, they're not up for a prosecution, but the people tell us that they feel that way because they've been taken to a courthouse. It might look very good. I have asked several times for the accessibility assessments that are done for these courthouses, and it's all about handrails, signage and so on. Nothing about the impact that it actually has on people who are applying for PIP, personal independence payments, because they're vulnerable. So if we could just perhaps pass this letter on to our disability strategy, the expert panel, and ask them if they could make a response back to the department on this letter.
Thank you, Kelly. I know that you have brought this up several times, and I know Paul maybe has a slightly different opinion, but Paul, go ahead.
I probably feel like a salmon in this issue, swimming against the tide, but I would ask the committee and the members within it just to be careful what we wish for here. The facts and the figures are clear there. 37% of all venues used, 13 were courthouses. There's a real reason for that, and I can only talk about personal experience, being based in Ballymena. They've used 2 venues over the last 5 years, one being Courtroom 3 and one being the Ballymena Business Centre, which is out in Gilgorm, which is about 3 miles from the town centre. And Courtroom 3, you can get access to that court through the back gate, which is a town centre street, and you're 2 metres away from the door of the court. And the court actually looks like a classroom. Whereas if you go to Ballymena Business Centre, albeit a very modern facility, which is very good for businesses, incubators of business, it's a boardroom. And actually the boardroom is more threatening and more scary than the Courtroom 3, because it looks like a classroom. So my personal experience and the experience of my constituents who I help go through the process of PIP or ESA, I would far rather go to Courtroom 3 in the centre of the town, where it's far more accessible. You don't have to ask your appellant to drive 3 miles out of the town, majority of them who live in the town actually, and it's much scarier going to a boardroom with a big table the size of this, our table here, sitting across the appeals panel. Now, the appeals panels are always very professional, and I always admire the work that they do, but the setting is important, I agree, but in Ballymena's case, Courtroom 3 is the far better place with consultation rooms.
I would have to say the opposite for Newtownards Courthouse, where people have to walk down a dingy corridor where there's no seating to stop at, and it is a boardroom setup. It is horrible. When I've gone to appeals, people who go into the courthouse end up in tears, and the after effects on them is horrendous. The business centre that we use is a lot more relaxed. It's exactly the opposite, of what you're saying. It's the setting, and that's where I would like the expert panel on the disability strategy, that maybe they go and visit the rooms that are being used and consider whether or not they really are fully inclusive.
I suppose what I would add just in closing is that the privacy in Courtroom 3 and the surrounding buildings, rooms is much better. The privacy is much better than in the Ballymena Business Centre, where you have business people walking in and out, customers walking out, retail shops all about the place, and you're sitting trying to represent your applicant and try and coach them before they go into an appeal setting. It's not ideal. So whilst I get that every single individual surrounding will have to be looked at and its own merits, what I would call for is that we don't push for a blanket ban on courtrooms, because I do see the merit in using courtroom 3 in Ballymena.
Okay, I know in Belfast, I've only ever, and I think it was the old family court, but that was years ago. It's generally in about 5 different locations in Belfast. You could be going anywhere, so you could. So it's not much of a problem for us. I don't know if anybody else has anything further they want to add on that, but I suppose it's just to keep a watch an eye on this one. And I get certainly where Kelly's come from. I mean, you know, Newton Arts Courthouse, it's right on the main street. It's, yeah. It's not great.
It's more the case that when someone goes in through that door, where Newton Arts Courthouse is, it's obvious there's somebody going into court. They walk down a long corridor, up a lift, which is fine, and we'll have to walk down another long corridor, and it is like a boardroom setup, as Paul has said. You know, it's
vaguely remember. I think I did one before I was an MLA, many years ago, an appeal by back then, about 15 years ago.
It's the mental health impact. What are we saying to people who are simply appealing a process that they feel hasn't done them right? This is their appeal, and we're putting them in court. It's not. We know that they're not being taken to court. It's just a building, but it's quite hard to explain that.
Yeah. No, look, that's fair enough. We'll keep an eye out. Sorry, Mark and Ciara want in, so Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'd always been very much on the same side of this as Kelly, and for many years have called for appeals to be removed from court houses altogether because of how it makes people feel and the stigma attached to it, and the stigma it reinforces actually around benefits and claimants. However, I think it's important that we do take on board the points that Paul is making. It depends just on suitability of a place and availability of other suitable space or lack of availability of suitable space. But I think it's vitally important that wherever appeals are taking place, whether it be in a business centre, a hotel or a courtroom, that appropriate facilities are there to enable access and use by people with disabilities. You know, that's vitally important. We can't be having this in substandard accommodation whenever it's already a daunting enough process for people, as we all know.
Thanks, Mark. Ciara?
Repeat, but likewise I would agree with Kelly and Mark, and I think something needs to be constantly under review, and it's constantly looking at option appraisals within our council areas as to the most suitable and accessible premises to undertake the appeals. So I think it's just something that needs to be constantly under review, you know, as premises become available and more suitable premises. It shouldn't be something that isn't on an annual basis even reviewed, with options put forward to what's most suitable. And if it's a number of options, all the better.
Thanks, Ciara. I think this is just one we'll have to keep a watch on. And each of us knows our own areas and how that operates in our own areas and what's best and what's not. So we'll keep an eye on this if members are agreed. Yeah.
Could we write to the expert panel and ask them their thoughts?
Yes. Yeah, we'll do that also. Okay, members, can we move on then to page 31 of your pack, where you'll see a ministerial response on the allocation of the 13 million for post-COVID recovery for the arts sector. The Minister states that she has made up to 5.5 million available to the Arts Council for a scheme to support self-employed and freelance creative individuals. She is now considering a range of options to utilise the remaining 7.5 million. Again, members, any comments on that are content to note at this stage? I would hope that we get to see that scheme sooner rather than later. That's all I would comment on it, and just the time around that, the issues around that. So that's all. Members, anything else? No?
No.
Okay, then can I move you on then to page 33, where you'll see a ministerial response on the High Street Voucher scheme. So the Minister states that the Department will disregard the £100 High Street card as a source of income when calculating social security benefits, so that's good news. Again, any comments on that or content to note?
Delighted.
Delighted.
It's in writing now, yes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to page 34. Members, at last week's meeting, there were queries raised in relation to the current status of the anti-poverty strategy. We've now been provided with a departmental response that issued as part of the committee correspondence during the summer, so not now, we got it. The response states that work on the development of the anti-poverty strategy continues with co-design group and a cross-departmental working group. A public consultation exercise is scheduled for later in the year, and it is planned that the strategy will be published before the end of the Assembly mandate, subject to executive approval. I don't know if that gives us an awful lot of time, if they're looking at the end of the year for public consultation to be scheduled later this year, so that's not that very far away. And again, this is one of the many strategies that I think that this committee will want to have a little bit of input into as well. So it's just quite worrying that it's coming so late in the day. And I know we're worried about all of the strategies that are due to come to us, that we won't have the time to give them sufficient scrutiny. And as someone who has sat here for a number of years, and others will know that we have strategies that we have rushed through before the end of mandates. And we have a library full of them, and some of them are not worth the paper they're written on because they have been rushed. I would rather see something that is robust and something that can hold the executive to account and people to account, rather than something being rushed just to get it in before the end of the mandate. So that's the only thing I would flag up on that. Members, any comments? Kelly?
I was just going to say, on page 35, the second last paragraph, can we find out exactly who are the co-design group and the cross-departmental working group, who's involved in that, and if this independent or whatever it is, welfare mitigations panel is actually included in that, because we're talking about poverty, this is wide-ranging. The other thing I would like to find out is, is there any timescale that we can be provided with on this, because my concern will be departments are already talking about the 3-year budget period. If this strategy is not going to happen in advance of those budget requests, submissions going forward, does that mean that the outworkings of this strategy then will not be funded?
Okay, no, that's a good point as well. So a few questions already asked. Anybody else want to make any comment on this? Are content? Okay, so are content then with those questions, and we'll move on. Okay. All right, with the next bit done, so that's us finished then, I think, with Matters Arising, is that correct? Yep. Okay, we're going to move on then to agenda item 6 then, which is the Charities Bill. Members, you've been provided with a copy of a reply from the Charity Commission on page 37 of your pack. The committee had asked for the number of organisations that had asked the Charity Commission to register them more quickly, and what issues are of disadvantaged special circumstances are they raising in making their requests, and for copies of the annual monitoring forms for charities. Again, members, any comments they want to make on that, or they content to note that piece of correspondence? Go ahead, Claire.
I had raised this earlier in our meeting, but it's just I would like clarification on the application form that we have been sent. It does say at the end of the application form, if I can just find it here, apologies, it's page 60, that any of the information that is provided, I'll read it out. The disclaimer says, please note that the information and documentation you submit will automatically be published to the Commission's online public register. I would like to ask the Commission if they can clarify when they're asking, for instance, trustees for their details. They've asked for trustees' date of birth. Why is that going to be published? It might well be information that the Commission wants to see, but why is it automatically going to be put in an online public register? They also ask for the charity's bank account. There's nothing beside that that says that it won't also be published on the online register. So it's just clarification on this form. Are we missing something here where there should be an asterisk that says this is, this won't be in the public domain? Certainly may be useful for the Commission to have, but not in the public domain. There are certain things that we have to protect, and I think as this committee we need to be able to protect people. We don't want identity fraud happening.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Andy?
Sir, can I declare an interest as a charity trustee? And just on the point Callie's making, I can confirm as a charity trustee, none of that information is published. It is only the trustee's name and title. And I appreciate obviously the point you're making. It may well need to be more clearly detailed to reflect that it's not published, but it's not. If you go onto the register of registered charities and you go through, you will see charity trustees details, and it is only their name.
Yeah. It's just if somebody was to ask a Freedom of Information request, what's on the public register is not necessarily what the Freedom of Information will provide. The Freedom of Information can be anything that's on this form. So that's where we need to be very clear.
Yeah, I wouldn't be so sure under GDPR, but...
Yeah, well, we can ask those questions, so we can, certainly, just to get clarity on that. Anybody else, anything on that issue they want to highlight? Okay, then we'll move on then to page 62, where you'll see 3 summary tables of the evidence from written submission to the Charities Bill. Members, these will be useful for reference for we start our deliberations on the clauses of the bill next week, so it might be worth having a read over those or printing those off to have them by your side when we start that next week.
Yeah.
Okay, that is everything then under that agenda item. Okay, we're going to move then on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 7, which is Social Enterprise NI briefing on the Charities Bill. You'll find a copy of their submission at page 115 of your meeting pack. And then can I welcome Colin Jess to the meeting? There's Colin's in the spotlight. Colin, you're very welcome to join us today. Can I ask you then to go ahead and begin your briefing? You have up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, can I just confirm you can hear me, Chair?
Can indeed.
That's great, thank you very much. Thanks very much, and I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to you today on the Charities Bill on behalf of Social Enterprise Northern Ireland. So just to give a bit of background, we are the membership and representative body for the social enterprise sector across Northern Ireland. Sector comprising almost 900 organisations operating as businesses with a focus on delivering on their social impact and support for those across the community who are less well off than many others. These organisations have all been formed in order to find a solution to a social problem, and whilst operate as a social business, in some cases some have begun life as a charity or indeed are an offshoot of a charity. In these cases, the charity has sought additional income streams away from reliance on grants and donations to create an alternative source of income. It was these organisations who found it so difficult in the early stages of COVID, as their trading income stopped almost overnight, whilst other grant-reliant organisations still had that support to fall back on. My evidence is therefore given against that background, and noting that a recent survey confirmed that almost 50% of our membership base would consider themselves as charities by being set up as a company limited by guarantee with the charitable status. I believe you have our submission to the consultation and the written evidence, so I'll therefore just comment on a few points and focus on the elements of the bill which I believe is most impact on social enterprises, having taken feedback from the members. In terms of Clause 1 and the retrospective ability to make the majority of decisions taken by Commission staff as lawful, we would be supportive, and we welcome this step and would encourage this to be put in statute as soon as possible. Organisations and staff have acted in good faith, and therefore their actions should remain lawful. Apart from anything else, it would be a logistical headache to start the process all over again. We would also support the proposal that those decisions considered unlawful or contentious should not be subject to this clause and should proceed to their natural conclusion, which may ultimately be via the courts. The refreshed appeals process is also welcomed. However, we do have concerns around the timetable noted within the bill. I'm happy to take questions on that. In respect of Clause 2, Social Enterprise Northern Ireland members are supportive of the mechanism and believe it will be imperative for Commission staff to have delegated power in order to carry out their duties and make decisions in a timely manner legally supported by the bill. We would welcome a process that staff could refer difficult or borderline decisions to committee or board members where they feel further input and support is required. We would not wish to see these staff put in a position nor have the ability or power to make decisions which would impact upon the reputation or future of a trustee or a charity without ability to seek clarification from seniors. Also, while the Department have responsibility for the sector, we believe that the publication of the scheme of delegation should be co-designed alongside the Commission, thus ensuring the Commission's processes are considered at an early stage. In terms of clause 3, in response to the question of thresholds, the responses generally from the sector were in favour of these being introduced. The feedback received was that they believed that many small charities found it difficult to meet the current reporting requirements, and indeed that they were a deterrent for many to register. Having said that, I refer to my written document regarding the law in Scotland, which needs further explanation on my part, and following some additional inquiries have been made. It is now my understanding that organisations can have charitable aims. However, as long as it doesn't declare itself as a charity, then it doesn't have to register. From a personal perspective though, and whilst there are advantages for those smaller organisations not to have to register, there are advantages from a governance perspective of having organisations on the list, and again, happy to discuss that further. So Chair, I'm happy to take any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. I'm going to go first of all to your last comments there around, because it has exercised us greatly. There's been for and against when it comes to registration of smaller charities. And I don't want to put you on the spot anyway, but I'm going to sort of ask you if you had to fall somewhere there, for or against, or just, I mean, if you just want to go into just a bit more detail of, you know, I mean, we're always looking at unintended consequences as something that we have to be mindful for in everything that we scrutinise every bill. So it's, I suppose, just asking some of those issues.
Okay, in terms of the thresholds, if I was asked from a representative body perspective to think of a threshold, I'd probably say the members would be looking for £10,000 as a threshold. There's lots of demands. A lot of these smaller organisations are run and managed by volunteers, and the feedback is that some do find it daunting to have to make those commitments and those responses. The other side of the fence, and probably goes back to my personal and my previous role as well, is that generally grants and funding organisations will look for a charity to be registered. So there would be an issue that if we allowed some charities not to be registered, would those grants that they previously availed of that are currently there, would they retrospectively need to be returned, or would they still be concerned or considered as valid? So not only funds and grants, but outside organisations looking in, like, and I go back to former life, like banks, do take a certain comfort by the fact that an organisation is listed as registered. It actually shows that a governing body has carried out due diligence on that organisation. And I know that we did differentiate when we were looking to provide banking facilities and bank accounts even for organisations, that if they were registered, they were acceptable. If they were unregistered, they weren't able to avail of the scheme. So I think looking in, the fact that an organisation is on a list as registered, there is a comfort to outside organisations in seeing that, you know what, that governing body has done its due diligence, and we do take comfort from that. So perhaps really what we're talking here is that maybe all need to be registered. However, the lighter touch for small, we sort of can't expect organisations that are turning over £2,000 or £3,000 to have the same requirements and same demands as those turning over, say, £250,000. So that's where I sort of come down on at the end of the day, that outside organisations looking in do take comfort in the fact that an organisation has gone through due diligence by being registered on the list.
Okay, Colin, thanks for that. That's certainly what we have been hearing, and certainly when it comes to those smaller charities, there is that issue around if they are registered, then it maybe gives them greater leverage, I suppose, in applying for certain funding. Just want to then finally ask you about clause 2, and I know your submission notes general agreement, but it's just there, if you have any specific issues you want to highlight, if you could just highlight those.
No, I think, as I said in clause 2, we are supportive of clause 2 and the terms within it. I think the point I would just reiterate as well is that, you know, there needs to be some sort of mechanism for staff within the commission. The delegating of power is fine, but, you know, we need some sort of support mechanism for them, that if they do have a borderline case, that they are able to refer that to someone, be it on the commission or being on the board, just for support and backup, because making decisions, could have such a negative impact on a trustee or a charity's reputation. So reputationally, I don't think it should be down to individual staff members, but it should actually be, they should have a support mechanism within the Commission. But we do believe that they should be able to make decisions in a timely manner, because the number of organisations that are coming forward to prevent any backlogs, I think it's important that staff are suitably delegated with the powers to proceed.
I just actually have one more. It's just around the 42 days time. You're saying that it's too short. We've heard from others in front of committee that have proposed possibly the likes of a 3 calendar month time frame. Would that be what you would be looking at as well?
Yeah, I suppose where we're coming from on that, Chair, is that currently it's 42 days. And I believe as well, from my understanding, is that the 2 processes of appealing to the Commission and Tribunal run concurrently. I think that's very difficult. Many of these organisations are small, run by volunteers, only get together once a month. To give them time to arrange meetings, to give them time to gathering supporting evidence, to give them time for even legal support in some cases. I think 42 days is far too short. Now, what we'd propose perhaps is an overall period of 3 months, and that the clock starts ticking once the appeal is made back to the Commission. And that could be for 42 days that the Commission have to come back with a response. But then there should be an additional period up to 3 months from the date of the first inquiry back to the Commission that they go to the Tribunal. So overall, a period of 3 months would be, whether or not 3 months turns out to be 12 weeks or 90 days, but I think that would be our preference, and I think that would be workable. It just gives organisations who don't have staff or maybe run by volunteers more of a chance and more of an acceptable time to respond. But I think splitting the two appeals into 2 rather than running concurrently would be important as well.
Grant, Colin, thank you. Can I ask members if they want to ask anything? I'll bring in Kelly first. Kira, you did have your hand up, but it's gone down again. So if you want to come in, can you put it up again? Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Colin. Good to see you again. I'll just declare an interest as a member of the All-Party Group on Social Enterprise. Colin, you'd mentioned there, just to tease out this idea about the thresholds for registration. When we have looked at information, we know that there are, in England for instance, there is the threshold, but there are a number of charities who are getting registered anyway because they see the need to be a charity. Do you think that we shouldn't, or do you think that we should be including the ability for those charities under, say, £10,000 to apply for charitable status if they wish?
Yeah, if you do decide to draw a line at 10,000 below that do not need to register, it is imperative, I believe, that organisations who do wish to register should be allowed to. It shouldn't be a cut-off that if you're below a certain threshold you can't register. I think that option has to be there. As I said earlier, there's a comfort all around in charities being on a registered list. There's no doubt about that. And I think that some charities may seek the protection and the governance and the due diligence around being registered. And I think it's important that they should be offered the opportunity to go on the list should they so desire, even though it is below any potential threshold that is brought in.
Yeah, and then just to ask then, you said during your presentation that 50% of your huge number of members consider themselves as charities. The other 50% then, I'm assuming, wouldn't be registered charities. How would this sit with them, because they're likely to be above that 10k, or are these those members that would actually fit underneath the 10k income, if that was the threshold? Sorry.
No, well, our members vary in size, from startups, 1-person, 2-person organisations, right up to the large social enterprises that will be well known to everybody, creating millions of pounds of turnover. Those social enterprises who haven't taken charitable status, for example, we have organisations that just chose not to avail of charitable status and just set up as organisations. The social enterprise business model there's no company status, for example. There's no definition or social enterprises are organisations that basically what they do with their profits is different to what an SME would do and redistribute their profits for their social mission. So they don't need to be a charity to do that, but some of them just deem themselves and want themselves to be considered as charities. So I don't think it would have any issues for any organisations that would be outside that level or above that threshold at all.
Okay. This bill seems to be silent on CIOs. Have you any thoughts on that being added into the bill?
Charitable incorporated organisations. I don't really have any specific thoughts on that, Kelly. I was more concerned with sort of what the thoughts of our members were within that, and I know that certain other parts of the UK we would have that considered as part of the bill, but I haven't really done any research on that, and I wouldn't want to comment on that, to be honest.
So it's not something that the social enterprise sector would see as an opportunity for you guys, or maybe not an opportunity for you guys? Okay. No, that's great. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. Any other member want to ask any questions of Colin? Nobody else has indicated that they want to at this stage. No, look, Colin, thank you for your time today. It's been most helpful. Absolutely. And for your submission into this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just congratulate Paul Free on his football team's result last night before I leave?
Is that being sarcastic or not?
No, absolutely not. No, as a Glentoran director, I would be very supportive of the work Ballymena are doing. So congratulations, Paul.
I think it was an indirect. That's an indirect compliment, I think, there, Colin. But well done to yourselves.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you. Okay, members, I'm just going to propose we take a very short comfort break and just prepare for our next witness session, okay?
Good.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This.
Thank you very much, members. I've just taken over chair. We do still have our chair here, but she will have to leave us shortly, as she said at the start. So we're moving to agenda item 8. It's the departmental briefing on the Charities Bill. Members, you've been provided at page 122 with the previous departmental replies to the matters we have queried so far on the bill. These replies deal with the omission of the power for charity regulator staff to perform functions in the 2008 Act, the exclusion of actions or decisions from being made lawful, the 6-week time frame for appeals, contacting all charities to advise of the time frame for appeals, why certain actions can never be delegated to staff, a scheme of delegation, registration threshold, the rationale for adding Clause 3 to the bill, and specific queries on Clause 2 following evidence sessions. Members, you've also been provided with a copy of the briefing paper for today's session in your tabled papers. And I would like at this stage then to welcome Sharon Russell and Martin Ireland. Sharon and Martin, thank you very much for coming along to see us today. Good morning.
Chair, can I be heard and seen?
You can indeed, Sharon. Thank you very much.
Great.
If you would like to take us
through. I just
through.
wanted to check because I can't hear the committee very well. I can see Martin and you now.
Oh, brilliant. So I'll hand over to you guys at this stage. If you want to take us through your previous replies before you talk to the briefing paper, as we have a few new members, as you know, and it would be useful if they could just be updated, catch up on the issues that have been raised so far.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to, the clerk had asked us if we could come along today to clarify some of the points in advance, obviously, of your going into your formal deliberations, clause by clause, very soon. And we're very grateful for that opportunity, particularly as there are new members around the table. And we would just like to reiterate our offer of separate briefings to new members, because we know some of this is complex. So my name's Sharon Russell, as you've said. I have a wider responsibility around the community and voluntary sector division in the department, and Martin heads up the very small charities team within that division. So we have, we think, set out in the briefing paper just a quick, as the clerk has asked us, a quick reminder of the background and the drivers for the bill. Martin then has tried to pick up, as you've gone through the evidence sessions. Obviously, we've just heard the tail end of the Senate input there just before this meeting. But he has tried to pick up on some of the issues that you have written to us on, and then we can see if there are any gaps. Happy to hand over to Martin to walk through those details and those previous responses. So just by way of background, as a reminder for you all, we updated committee on the 6th of May and again on the 10th of June. And as in those briefings and those accompanying briefing papers, what we stated was that the main drivers for this bill are essentially to address the impact arising from the McBride and Court of Appeal judgments in terms of past decisions taken by staff, the impact on charities due to the fact that these decisions have been found to be unlawful. Secondly, then, to create an effective framework for how the Charity Commission itself discharges its functions, because, again, at one of those briefings, you as members teased out, the additional cost and obviously the reduction, where we're seeing fewer registrations and decisions coming through as a result of the committees that have been set up since the judgment. In addition, I know this has been an issue for you and some of your people that have given evidence. In addition, the bill does provide, as currently drafted, a power to introduce a future registration threshold via regulations that would be subject to draft affirmative procedure, as that would be a policy change, albeit one that the Minister was lobbied strongly on. And I know that as a committee, you too have had representation from some interests who have long sought a threshold. So that was an additional clause in the bill. So essentially, as people have said to you, the Court of Appeal judgments had a significant impact on the framework here in Northern Ireland, rendering the register itself unlawful, placing those charities that have gone through the process in a position where they were now unsure about the impact it would have in terms of previous funding, current funding relationships, and the impact it would have on them in terms of applying for funding going forward. The fact the register was unlawful also removed the legal requirement for charities to register, supply their annual report and accounts to the Commission. And therefore, in doing that, it removed the public transparency the charities were afforded by that process itself. Left a number of charities, and this is an important one, I think, in terms of representation to us and to the Minister from representative bodies. Charities that had acted in consequence of orders or directions that they thought were lawful, permitting them to take certain actions, were then confused as to what the judgments might mean for them as trustees and as individuals. So the feedback, obviously, that the Department and the Minister, there was a lot of public interest around how quickly the Minister should move to address this situation in terms of the confusion that it left charities in. Particularly, and I think we've been frank in this to committee, as this was as a result of a flaw or a deficiency in legislation brought by the Department. So, you'll have heard from a lot of respondents that, research that the Commission itself undertakes is that most charities would demonstrate that most charities understand and support, the value of charity regulation. they take comfort in it and are able to comply with the requirements of the framework because of the public trust and confidence in the work they do. And I picked up the tail end of Colin's evidence to you, which seemed to validate that. So, you know, evidence of that for us would be the fact that 65% of charities continue to provide their annual report and accounts to the Commission, even though they're aware that they're no longer legally required to do so in this period. So I think the issue of retrospective legislation has come up again and again, and you'll remember from the briefing sessions that we were again very frank around the Minister for Communities has a very clear and publicly stated focus on rights and equality. Therefore, the idea of retrospective legislation certainly did not appeal to her, or it wouldn't appeal to any minister, unless the legal advice we had was that there was no other plausible route open to address the issues that were presented to her and that people were coming to her with. So we did not, and certainly the Minister would not have allowed us to rush to make retrospective legislation without very strong, very clear, very carefully considered advice. Senior Counsel, the Attorney General herself, both actually, the previous one and the current Attorney General were consulted. And the determination was that retrospective legislation was required. Anything short of that, it would, you know, there'd be no validation of previous decisions made by Commission staff, and it would leave charities in receipt of those decisions remaining in that uncertain position in terms of decisions that were made and things that they acted on. So an administrative fix was not possible because fresh decisions would require proper scrutiny, not a rubber stamping, you know, as in a job lot, so to speak, and then they would only be applicable from the date of the fresh decision. So, you know, we're happy to go into that a wee bit further because I know that it has been raised by a number of respondents. So we have taken the view that Clause 1 simply returns charities to the position that they enjoyed prior to the judgments, with certain caveats and carve-outs, as you know. Clause 2 and 3 then provides for powers to introduce things at a later date that would be subject to full consultation. So I know that consultation's been raised by you as well. The Minister's view was she was being lobbied hard to move quickly to try to fix the situation that was not of the making, you know, it was not of charities making. They wanted that certainty. And therefore any specific policy changes would be subject to full consultation before any determination on those would be made. And that is the staff delegation and limited power of delegation, and also any future thought about a threshold, which is not determined. It's just in there as something that's been lobbied for very hard, and the Minister thought that it would be good to take those powers now so that she could, if it comes through in consultation, that is somewhere that stakeholders want to see the regulatory framework go towards, then the Minister would have that power. So just to pick up on the rights issue, the Minister was really, really clear that the bill would not impinge on the rights of any individual under ECHR rights, and she could not have been clearer around that. So again, I know that some people have raised issues around that, and as we go through clause by clause, we'll pick up on some of them, and there are one or two areas where we're taking further legal advice as a result of some things coming out of committee stage. So, you know, the value of committee stage obviously has been proven when we've had to go back and take some further legal advice. So the protections you see in the bill in terms of clause 1.3 to 1.5 are as a result of those carve-outs where we went through categories of decision. Our advice was that it was neither realistic nor necessary to examine every single individual decision, but rather to look at them in terms of the categories of decision and the potential impact that those decisions could have on someone. So, you know, we did this on the advice of the Attorney General, sharing that exercise with her office as we went. So that's where those came from, and Martin, happy to talk to those in a minute. So fresh appeal rights obviously are included. but fresh appeal rights are not afforded for those decisions that remain unlawful. Because they're not affected by the bill, then they would proceed unhindered to their natural conclusion anyway by way of the courts. So for those decisions that remain unlawful, any charity challenged on their actions, unfit of an unlawful order, could seek to rely on Section 175 of the Act, as it believes the order was lawful when acted upon. And I know that some of this I'm getting into complexities, but I just think you might we put it in the written brief, and you might want to pick that up with us as we go through. Issues don't arise, obviously, for decisions and orders that are made lawful. So at this stage, I think maybe if there are any questions about the broad thrust or the Minister's intention in bringing the bill as currently drafted, happy to take them now, or I was just going to hand over to Martin to go through the clauses and those questions that you've raised around them, and then allow for questions at the end of that.
Thank you.
Happy enough, Chair, that we pass over?
Yes, absolutely, Sharon. I think that makes sense, Martin, because otherwise you'll get lots of questions that you're already going to be covering.
Yes.
So if you want to continue on then, Martin, thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Can everybody hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Clause 1 is complicated. Despite our best efforts to try and make it as simple as possible, it deals with very complex issues. So if you're content, I'll go through it in a little bit more detail than I will the other clauses. It deals with making previous unlawful decisions lawful, except where to do so would likely impinge on the rights of individuals under ECHR. It provides fresh appeal rights in accordance with Schedule 3 of the Charities Act, Northern Ireland 2008, the Act, where such decisions are made lawful, and this applies accounting and reporting requirements for past periods, ensuring that charities are not overburdened in that regard, where they have not continued to provide accounts and reports voluntarily to the Commission. And as Sharon has said, it's very heartening that approximately 65% of charities have continued to provide those accounts. Understanding Clause 1.1 and 1.2 and the limits placed upon it by clauses 1.3 to 1.5 is crucial to understanding this bill. Clause 1.1 defines the relevant actions that are to be made lawful by Clause 1.2. The clause picks up both the regulatory decision in respect to the function and the acts done or other decisions taken or alleged to be done or taken by staff in the making of that regulatory decision. This is important, for example, in respect of the register, where a number of separate mini-type decisions or decision points are required under sections 1 to 3 of the Act before the actual decision to register is made. The decision maker must determine, for instance, that the body is independent, that it's governed by the law of Northern Ireland, that it is for exclusively charitable purposes, and that it provides a public benefit before the final decision is taken that it is actually a charity and it must be registered. Clause 1.2 therefore means that the relevant action as defined in Clause 1.1 will be treated as if it had always been made by the Commission and therefore always lawful, except where it is unlawful on grounds other than delegation. That's the retrospective issue that we're talking about. In this way, we make approximately 7,000 regulatory decisions, orders and directions lawful, treating them as if they were always lawful and thereby restoring the regulatory framework and providing the certainty needed by the affected charities. However, as Sharon explained, from the very outset, the Minister was clear that the bill should not impinge on the rights of individuals under ECHR. This is addressed by the protections afforded in clauses 1.3 to 5. Clause 1.3 makes it clear that it is not the intention to revisit or overturn the findings of any tribunal or court up to the date of royal assent. Clause 1.4 carves out decisions which are the subject of ongoing litigation where the lawfulness of the relevant action is one of the grounds. Clause 1.5 provides that certain decisions which in the main were taken during the course of a statutory inquiry, such as the suspension or removal of trustees, and which have proved most controversial in some cases, will be unaffected by the bill. These decisions will remain unlawful and therefore be allowed to proceed to their natural conclusion. To this end, Clause 1.5 carves out decisions which were made in accordance with 22.6, the decision to publish a statutory inquiry, 24.1, which is the sharing of information by the Commission to other public bodies and office holders, or Orders 33 to 36, which are probably the most contentious and provide the power for the Commission to act for the protection of charities by taking actions such as suspension or removal of a trustee or the appointment of an interim manager. An exercise was undertaken on the advice of the Attorney-General with both the Commission and the Departmental Solicitor to identify the appropriate category of order to include in this clause. These orders or decisions had led to the majority of appeals to the Charity Tribunal and can have major consequences for individuals. Interestingly, around 80 appeals have been made to the Charity Tribunal, and all but 26 of those relate to this type of order in Clause 1.5. Statutory inquiries were opened by commissioners and therefore will not be made lawful by this bill, as there is no need to do so. Where a court or tribunal has found that it hasn't been opened lawfully, this bill will not overturn that. However, the decision to publish the resultant report under Section 22.6 was taken prior to McBride by staff and could impinge on a person's rights under Article 8 of ECHR. Consequently, it's covered in this clause. During the evidence session on the 7th of October, one of the respondents has stated that Clause 1.5 should be extended to cover Section 174 of the Act. That allows the Commission to make an application to the High Court where a person is guilty of disobedience of an order of the Commission. However, we've checked with the Commission when drafting the bill, and no such application was made prior to McBride. Clause 1.6 ensures that a decision unlawfully taken prior to McBride is not made lawful where a corresponding fresh decision has been taken lawfully since McBride. In other words, since McBride, the committee established a Schedule 1 committee to take decisions. Some charities who wanted to ensure they were acting lawfully going forward asked for a fresh decision, and that was given lawfully by the committee. There was potential there for it to be two lawful decisions out there, and that would lead to legal uncertainty. So Clause 1.6 ensures that that won't happen. The fresh appeal rights that have been widely talked about are provided in 1.7 and 8, and they're in accordance with appeal rights currently there in Schedule 3 of the Act. Fresh appeal rights are not provided where they did not previously exist, or for decisions that are to remain unlawful. We do not believe there will be many such appeals. The evidence for this is that there were very few when the decisions were first taken, and the decisions when royal assent is achieved will be between 3 and 8 years old, so charities will have acted on those decisions and moved on. So we believe it's unlikely that there'll be fresh appeals, but the rights are there anyway. Such appeal rights are to be subject to the standard appeal timeframe. Our thinking on that was that that would keep them, there would be no difference between appeals arising from this bill and those that were the subject of ordinary day-to-day appeals on decisions made. The Department was intending to contact the Charity Tribunal to appraise them of this issue and work with the Commission and sectoral representatives to ensure that the message was spread as widely as possible. However, the Commission, during its briefing to the Committee on the 16th of September, advised that whilst it has the facility to contact individual charities, it may not be able to directly contact other parties that might be affected. There could therefore be a justification in allowing extra time for appeals arising from this bill. However, any proposal to extend the timeframe for appeals generally would be outside the scope of this bill. The Charity Tribunal rules are the responsibility of the Department of Justice, and we could certainly talk to them going forward. But any change to that 40-day limit generally we couldn't do through this bill. I think some of the respondents have talked about extending to 3 months for appeals arising out of this bill. The appeals are normally 42 days. They're usually set in day time frames. So we were thinking, rather than 3 calendar months, perhaps 91 days from the date of royal assent would give additional time for those appeals. It must be remembered as well that the Charity Tribunal rules allow the tribunal to consider appeals that are out of time, and they consider a number of factors, and one of them is how and when the actual potential appellant was made aware of the decision and their right of appeal. At the evidence session the 7th of October, the respondents raised issues about Section 22.3 and Section 23. These are about collecting of data which might include personal data. The departments reflected on this, and as a result we decided to take legal advice, and we'll come back and update the committee as soon as we've got that and had time to fully consider it. Moving on to Clause 1.9, it addresses a concern that was raised that if you treat a registration decision as always being lawful, would that mean that the charities that hadn't provided their accounts voluntarily be under a statutory obligation to account for prior periods before royal assent? 1.9 addresses that, ensuring that the annual accounting and reporting requirements contained within Part 8 of the Act are not imposed for past periods on charities whose registration is made lawful. The outworkings of the McBride judgment and subsequent registrations made by the decision-making committee will determine the course of action required by an affected charity. But the fact that we're actually putting the date of the 1st of April 22 in the bill, as opposed to leaving it for the date of royal assent, will give clarity and allow them to plan ahead as necessary. Clause 1 will inevitably lead to an accountability gap, as explained by the Commission and I think evidenced in one of the other sessions. However, the Department feels that this is low risk and any risks are outweighed by the benefits provided to charities. Again, 65% are continuing to comply voluntarily, and they can continue to do so. Clause 2 then also addresses an issue that arose out of the McBride judgment, which is how the Commission functions effectively going forward. It therefore introduces a limited power of delegation to staff, provided that the decisions to be delegated are set out in a scheme of delegation made by the Department. It also, however, at Clause 2.2 stipulates that certain decisions, which are mostly around the opening of a statutory inquiry and the powers of protection available to the Commission within that, should never be delegated. Although such orders can be made by staff in other jurisdictions throughout the UK and Ireland, the Minister has taken the view that in order to restore confidence in the process here, such decisions are better taken by the Commission or a committee. The committee may determine that the exclusion of these particular functions should be left to the proposed scheme of delegation and not stipulated in the bill. However, the Department reflected on the obiter comments made in the Court of Appeal judgment that careful consideration should be given as to whether any powers should be delegated to staff, and felt that such legislative provision should help restore that trust and confidence in the system. This, however, doesn't mean that every other decision inevitably will be delegated to staff in a scheme of delegation. The Department will consult before it brings the scheme of delegation in, and it can be changed should more parts of the Act be commenced and the Commission take on additional powers, or the Department decides to review it for any other reason. It should perhaps be noted that the Commission currently makes approximately 30 regulatory category of decision. If the whole Act was commenced, this would rise to around 80 regulatory categories of decision. Turning to Clause 3 then, regulations exempting charities from registering by reference to the threshold. The most important thing to note here is this does not introduce a registration threshold. It introduces the power to introduce one through regulations at a further date. I caught what Mr. Jess had said, and I know that others have expressed the view that charities that fall below the threshold should be able to register if they want. the regulations are wide enough that would allow for that. Similarly, if a charity is currently on the register and falls below the threshold, they could request that they be removed from the register. So to briefly summarise what the regulation power would do, it would allow you to set the level of the threshold and whether it includes a consideration of a charity's assets, any mechanics that are required around the operation of a threshold, such as a calculation of it, any evidence requirements, the ability of a charity to be removed from it, as I said, or for one to be voluntarily registered, the need to amend other legislation as a result of what we would be essentially doing is creating a new category of charity, and the ability to modify any existing offences within the Charities Act to account for this new category of charity. Thank you, Chair. That's all I really have to say. I hope in going through that I've answered a number of queries that have been raised, and I know Sharon answered a number in her opening comments. I think we're happy to take any questions if you have them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to both of you on that. I'll just look round. Okay, I'm just checking to see anybody who's indicating, but I'll start the questions first. In evidence that we have received from NICFA, they have questioned, should it be the sponsoring department responsible for writing a scheme of delegation, or should it be the NDPB? What do you think about that?
Well, the reason why we've put the department in is so that the Minister can ultimately determine how the Commission delegates its functions. But in practice, we would obviously have to work very closely with the Commission in designing it. The legislation also states that we would consult with them, and we would consult wider publicly to ensure that there's proper accountability and transparency. The legislation will also require that scheme to be published so that there's full transparency about how the Commission delivers going forward. But it allows the Minister to have a certain amount of control how that delegation is delivered.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask in clause 1.5d, does that also allow the removal of money or items of value, and what happens with those when they are removed? So this is the part where it talks about the exclusion of trustees. Does that include the ability to remove money or items of value?
Sorry, clause.
Sorry, 1.5d.
1.5d. A decision or purported decision to disclose information.
Oh no, sorry. It was the one, sorry, I maybe wrote that down wrong when I was doing it. It's whenever the power that the Commission will have to remove a trustee, does that also extend, just in the original 2008 Act, to the removal of cash or assets, items of value, and what happens with those amounts?
Sorry, is this for the scheme of delegation going forward?
It's for clause 1, the actions of the staff. So
sorry, Chair, I'm not exactly sure. Could we come back to you on that?
Yeah, no, that would be good. It's just to know what all that one includes. Just my final one, and then I'll pass over to Paul. The discussion about the 91 days for the appeals, is that something that the department has proactively taken forward with Justice to look at that charity tribunal rules to see if that can be done, or will it have to be a decision that's taken for each one that goes beyond the 42 days? Is that an amendment that you guys are thinking about?
Well, we could possibly, if the committee wanted, amend our own bill for appeals that arise out of our bill. So we could do that. We would obviously advise the Department of Justice that that was our intention. But if it was to extend the 42-day appeal limit generally for all appeals to the Charity Tribunal, we would need to contact the Department of Justice and seek their views, because they are the owners of the tribunal rules, and we'd need to get their views on any unintended consequences or the impacts that might have.
No, that would be very helpful actually if that was something.
Yeah.
Paul, sorry.
Thank you,
let
Chair.
come in.
And thanks very much. Can I first of all say thanks very much, because you have answered a lot of my questions already through your briefing here today, and can I also compliment you on the submission you gave. We've got it in our table packs, which goes through each clause very, very well. So thank you for that, because it has certainly helped me immensely with regards to the understanding of this bill, and some of the queries and questions I had previous you have answered in that process. So thank you very much for that, and I commend yourselves and the department for that detail. Can I keep you on clause 2, powers of commission to delegate to staff, and the schedule, or sorry, the scheme. Clause 2.3 says the department may make a scheme describing, and you describe 2 aspects, things that may consistently with subparagraph 2 be delegated, and in relation to anything which may be delegated under subparagraph 1. Switch over the page to page 4, and clause 2 subsection 6 says the department must publish a scheme made by it under paragraph 3. Now, can I just ask your interpretation of that? Is subsection 6 saying there that the department must make a scheme and then publish it? Or is it saying there that if the department...
If we make a scheme, it would have to be published for transparency, yeah.
Yeah, so that's okay, I get that. So why then... So then I get that it's just that must publish it if a scheme is in existence. So then why...
It's a transparency piece, yeah.
Yeah, and I get that, and I support that. But then why then is clause 2, subsection 3 not stronger in that the department must make a scheme?
Because it'll be up to a minister at a future date to determine whether, in fact, they want to delegate anything via a scheme. This does not make delegation inevitable at all.
Okay. Okay, yep. Thank you for that. You say that, and keeping on clause 2 again, you say that before making a scheme under paragraph 3, the department must consult the commission. That's subsection 5. Why just the commission and not the public?
Well, it would be standard to consult the ALB in respect to the scheme, but Minister has determined that before such a scheme would be brought in, that it would be consulted on, but we didn't feel it necessary to put that actually in the bill, because that would mean that going forward, any minor amendment to the scheme would require that full public consultation again, when it may simply be minor. Obviously, if the Commission were to take on major new powers and it required a total rewrite of the scheme, then the Department would no doubt fully consult at that point in time. But for any minor amendment to it, we didn't want to make it a statutory requirement to go out every time for a full public consultation.
So if I get that right, the department are intending that if a scheme is needed and required, that it would have a public consultation up front to produce it. Yeah. Is there no wording in legislation that could secure that, but then safeguard you for future amendments?
We could certainly look at that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. With regards to both clause 2 and clause 1 and the delegation of power, and also the powers that aren't retrospective, we keep looking at this 33 to 36, the sections in the 2008 Act. You've very helpfully in our main pack given us a list of decisions that will be made lawful through this Act, and they total 7,150. Now, I'm only new to the committee, and this may well have been produced earlier, but what we don't have is a breakdown and a total. What I don't have is a breakdown and a total of all decisions made, which is different from the decisions that are going to be made lawful. And I suppose that brings me to my point on 33-36. I can't yet get a grasp of how significant those sections are. And I see, of course, when you go down that list of decisions to be made lawful, of obviously 33 to 36 is missing, because they won't be made lawful. But how many decisions were taken in the past that relate to 33 to 36? And also, I note, when you look at the list of decisions to be made lawful, they don't include 37, 38, 39, whatever they are. In fact, there's a gap between 31, subsection 1, and 46, section 46. So, are we sure that when we've got 33 and 33 to 36, sections 33 to 36 within the blue pages of this bill, are we sure that we're not missing a trick with regards before 33 and after 36, especially 37? And I think you alluded to this in your opening gambit, the power to direct application of charity property. So I'm just trying to find out the amount of decisions that were taken that incorporated those sections 33 to 36, the wider sections before 33 and after 36, right up to 46, and the quantitative nature of those and how important they are.
Yeah. As explained in the brief, we undertook an exercise with the Charity Commission and the DSO, and that identified decisions that the Commission had taken prior to McBride. So there may be sections in the Act that the Commission has never made an order or taken a decision on, so they're not included in this. We do have the number of decisions taken under 33 to 36, and we can certainly provide that to you. We actually have a table of decisions that were taken by the Commission by category, and we can provide that for completeness if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, because it just quantifies it. 'Cause I get your point entirely when you talked about, and you preempted one of my questions around section 1.74, and the fact, well, you don't need that power to be carved out if that power was never used, or the decision was never taken around that. So I get that. I really do get that. So that would be helpful if you could produce all the decisions made, not just the decisions that are going to be made lawful. Just on the other issue, the Deputy Chair has alluded to the issue around the 42 days. I think we are all concerned about that, so there's no need to dwell over that. I suppose, can I take you to the point about the whole retrospectivity of the bill and the nervousness that we should all have with regards to allowing a bill of this nature to go through, technical as it is, and the rationale for it we know. Have you, as a department, explored any other way of producing a bill that can cater for the needs of the bill and the aims of the bill without actually creating the retrospectivity? So, for instance, it was raised with us last week about a schedule of all the charities, and I think the registration is 6,396 according to your list. So, would it be conceivable, I suppose I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway, that you would have a schedule with 6,396 charitable names on it?
The retrospection is needed to provide the certainty to charities because, for instance, they would have been given consents by the Commission to change their articles of association or whatever, or extend their scope of what they did, and those consents are unlawful, so there's great uncertainty as to the effect of that. Also, with regard to registration, it's important that that's made lawful retrospectively, because a lot of these charities would have acted on the basis they were registered charities. Some funding is only available to registered charities, so they would have made funding applications based on that registration. And there's also potentially issues around tax exemptions that were claimed due to their registration as well. Now, we looked at this because we saw the evidence session last week, obviously, and apart from not addressing the retrospective nature, if you were to put 6,500 organisations in the schedule, there is, despite how many times you check it, there is the chance that you could miss one or add one that shouldn't be there. Apparently this has happened in legislation across the water, so it's not recommended as a practice. I think as well you'd talked about the possibility of a clause that would time limit the effect of that schedule, but then once that time limit runs out, you're back in the position again where you've got unregistered charities. Also, it was raised potentially, and it would have to be the subject of debate, but you could in doing this create a hybrid bill, which would be subject to Standing Orders 100 to 109, and there's a whole different procedure for that, and it would most likely mean that the bill wouldn't go through in this mandate, which is what the charity sector want. You could perhaps validate the existing list that's on the register, but as the bill is currently constructed, other grounds of challenge are currently protected, so that would mean that you would have to put some sort of clause in to protect those other grounds, and you would really be doing what the bill does minus the retrospection. So the advice is that
all the legal advice we have, is there is no other route right up to the, as I said, the previous and the existing Attorney General.
Okay. The last thing then in my questioning is, if I take you back to clause 1.7, the refreshed appeal rights, and the clause 1.7b, the relevant action is one mentioned in column 1 of the table in Schedule 3 of the 2008 Act. Now, I've looked at that column, and to be honest with you, it is quite widespread. But some of the people who have given evidence suggest that is limited with regards to appeal rights. They also raise the issue which you have said that you're going to look at, I think, around 22.3. But when I look at that column, I see section 22 mentioned. But does that mean then that that only covers certain aspects of section 22 and not 22.3? Or does that should that cover all? And
no. It stipulates in that schedule the actual people that can appeal and the grounds for appeal.
Yes.
So in relation to 22, if I can just find it very quickly here, decision of the Commission to institute an inquiry under section 22.
Yes.
So that's the actual opening of an inquiry, and the persons that can make that appeal are the persons who have control or management of the institution, and if a body corporate, the institution itself. The issues raised about 22.3 and 23 are complex, and that is why we have sought further advice, and we'll come back as soon as we can.
See, with regards column, when I read that at first, column 1 of the table in Schedule 3, I thought, well, how many other columns is there? But when you look at that, it's clear that column 1 is the decision, column 2 is the people, and column 3 is the power. Yeah. So can I ask, is there anywhere else in the 2008 Act where there's a list of directions or decisions that aren't allowed an appeal?
No. Only the ones that can be appealed are set out in Schedule 3.
And is there many sections within the 2008 Act that aren't appealable?
That I couldn't tell you. I don't think it really arises for what we're doing, but I would need to check on that.
Because ultimately, and I don't want you to go into too much detail or too much work, because I understand that if a decision wasn't made in the past relevant to a direction or a section, then there would be no point in naming that or listing that for us to see. So I get that, and I don't want to burden your workload at all. But just in case there are decisions, I think probably what I would like is a list of sections that's not appealable that decisions were made upon in the past. I think so. If we were getting a list of all the decisions made, then I think it would be proper that we would get then the list of sections that's not appealable on those decisions that were made. I think that would be fair.
I think we could do that reasonably quickly.
Yeah, well listen, I think
I'll check on that.
I thank you for that. I thank you for your time, and let me just compliment you again for the detail you have in our packs. It's very, very good. Thank you.
I'll just check with other members. Just checking on Starleaf if there's anyone else in the room. I think this is a sort of testament to the detail that has come forward, that no one else so far is raising their hand there. We will talk again, I think, Sharon.
Very soon.
I would say we'll talk again very soon. No, thank you.
This has been useful for us too, because obviously we'll be going into the clause by clause, so we will have even more detail to bring with us. So.
And it's right and proper that we do that with you after the amount of work that you guys are putting in and the evidence that we're hearing from people, so that we can make sure this helps to resolve this issue once and for all, and we get it right. But thank you very much for now, Sharon and Martin. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair.
And see you
Thank
soon.
you, members. Thanks very much.
See you soon. I think that we can then move on for agenda item 9. I'm just looking at Janice here. I don't think we'll be required to do anything else there.
No, we don't.
So agenda item 9 is then the departmental briefing on October monitoring round bid to mitigate for withdrawal of the £20 per week universal credit uplift. Members, we asked for this briefing session following the October monitoring round briefing last week's meeting, when we were advised that the department would be bidding for the £55 million to mitigate for the withdrawal of the £20 per week universal credit uplift. And we're welcoming today Anne McCleary, Anne's back again, and Paddy Rooney, Paddy's back again. Anne, if you could begin your briefing, please.
Yes, good morning, Deputy Chair, and good morning, committee members. Thank you for asking us to attend today to provide an update on the actions the Department has been taking to maintain the £20 per week universal credit uplift. We welcome the opportunity to brief you on this really, really important issue. As you said, my name is Paddy Rooney, and I'm currently the Acting Deputy Secretary for the Work and Health Group within the Department, and I'm joined by my colleague, who I think most of you know, Anne McCleary, who is the Director of the Social Security Policy and Legislation Director within the Department. So, Deputy Chair, if you don't mind, I will start with an overview, and I will call in Anne as we go through the briefing. So I'll start. Anne will provide details of the legislation required, and I will just continue with the details on the possible delivery mechanisms that we've been exploring. I'm sure committee members are aware that this is a really complex and unique issue. Committee members will be aware that a number of changes have been introduced throughout the pandemic to make the social security system more accessible, to strengthen the safety net and provide financial support for vulnerable people and families. Part of that wider support package for households was the increase to the standard allowances of universal credit and the basic element of working tax credit to help those on low incomes directly impacted by the economic impact of the pandemic. And the standard allowance, as you will know, for universal credit increased by just over £1,000 a year, £86 a month, or more commonly known as the £20 a week uplift. The increase was widely welcomed. Indeed, the Minister has continuously and clearly articulated her support for this much needed help for people experiencing increased financial pressures due to the reduced hours, reduced income, and in some cases job losses as a result of the pandemic. You will know the uplift was first introduced in April 20 and was due to end on the 6th of April 2021. However, the Chancellor announced in his budget speech on the 3rd of March that the uplift would be extended to the 6th of October 2021. And committee members will be aware that the UC uplift ended on that date. For almost a year, the Minister has stated publicly, both to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions and to her Executive and Assembly colleagues, that she is strongly opposed to this cut, as she recognises the enormous hardship it will cause for people who are already struggling. The Minister's first priority has always been for the universal credit uplift to be retained by Westminster. Over the past year, she has written to Therese Coffey, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, calling for the uplift to be made permanent on 4 separate occasions, joined by her colleagues in the devolved administrations on 2 of these occasions. The Minister also sought the escalation of this issue and welcomed the First and Deputy First Minister joining with the Scottish and Welsh First Ministers in making the same call to the Prime Minister. It was therefore, throughout this period, our priority to urge the DWP Secretary of State to maintain the uplift and for it to be made permanent. Had this happened, there would be no financial consequences for the Northern Ireland Block Grant. It must be remembered that the first extension to the universal credit uplift was announced close to the increasing to the expiry date on April 21. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, it was the Chancellor in the budget speech on the 3rd of March who announced the increase just before the first uplift was to end. And while Theresa Coffey, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, announced in July that the uplift would not be extended beyond the 6th of October, there has been continued calls and a considerable number of calls, not just from the public, but along with political and other representatives from right across the spectrum, both here and in GB, that the universal credit uplift would be extended. The Minister strongly supported these calls. However, in anticipation of the uplift being removed, we have been exploring options on how the uplift could continue here. And I'm sure committee members will appreciate that retaining the uplift would mean that we would be introducing a different universal credit standard allowance rate here than the rest of the UK. That's unprecedented, because to do so will require changes to the legislation, a technical solution that can identify and pay the uplift to people claiming universal credit in Northern Ireland, and will have financial consequences in terms of paying the additional standard allowance from the Northern Ireland Block Grant, cost of an IT solution, and the potential cost of additional staff dependent on the IT solution. In terms of the legislative impact, I'm going to pass over to Anne and she'll talk you through that. I think you might be on mute, Anne.
You're on mute. No.
Still can't hear you. Deputy Chair, if you mind, I will just continue on then and Anne's as Anne gets her technical problems sorted. So the universal credit uplift was included in the Social Security coronavirus further measures regulations Northern Ireland 2020 and amended in the Social Security coronavirus further measures amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2020 to ensure that the increased rate of universal credit took effect in relation to each award of universal credit in the first assessment period that ended on or after the 6th of April 2020. This legislation was brought forward by the Department for Work and Pensions on behalf of the Department because the power to make legislation had at that time not yet been restored to Northern Ireland following the reinstatement of the Northern Ireland Assembly in January 20. The powers to make legislation were restored to Northern Ireland on the 23rd of September 2020 by the Welfare Reform Northern Ireland Order 2015, Cessation of Transitory Provision Order 2020. Our first approach to the EWP was when Carol McCullen, the then Minister, wrote to Theresa Coffey along with Scottish and Welsh ministers on the 12th of November 2020, urging her to retain this uplift permanently. Following the Chancellor's announcement in March, the uplift was extended through the Universal Credit Extension of Coronavirus Measures Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. In July 2021, the UK Government confirmed that it would withdraw the uplift at the end of September as planned, giving evidence to the House of Commons Work and Pensions Committee on the 7th of July 2021. Theresa Coffey said that the uplift was being phased out in line with all other temporary measures that are also being removed. In response, Minister wrote to Theresa Coffey on the 26th of July, expressing her grave concern that the £20 uplift that you see is being withdrawn, particularly in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. In her reply to Minister Hargey, Theresa Coffey said the UK Government has always been clear that the uplift would be a temporary measure. Minister wrote again on the 30th of August to Theresa Coffey in a joint letter with the Scottish and Welsh ministers to seek the continuation of the £20 uplift to universal credit. As I mentioned earlier, the issue was escalated to the Executive, and a letter from the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, together with the First Ministers of Scotland and Wales, was issued to the Prime Minister on the 1st of October 2021, calling on the Westminster Government to reverse their decision to withdraw the £20 per week uplift. Minister Hargey sent a further letter to Theresa Coffey on the 1st of October, reiterating the consequences of the removal of the uplift. We have engaged with DWP informally to scope the feasibility of including the £20 uplift in the Universal Credit Service for Northern Ireland. Legislatively, this would require an amendment to Regulation 38, Amount of Elements of the Universal Credit Regulations Northern Ireland 2016, and use negative resolution. In line with Section 87 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998, the Department will be required to consult the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, but agreement is not required. The Department will, however, require Treasury agreement to mitigate retention of the uplift to ensure that there are no repercussive costs as outlined in the Emergency Treasury Statement of Funding Policy 2020 for the Executive. Unfortunately, legislation will not be retrospective, and if the bid is successful, people will have a gap in entitlement and back payments would not be possible. Continuing on, committee will be aware that universal credit, as with other social security benefits, is delivered through a single system developed and managed by DWP. And subject to DWP agreeing to bespoke changes to the universal credit service for Northern Ireland, resulting costs would be borne by the department, and timescales for delivery and reversal would be subject to DWP's approval, prioritisation and development schedule. Work is ongoing within the department to scope the delivery mechanism outside of the universal credit service for continuation of the uplift. As the scoping exercise continues to allow the department to give meaningful consideration to mitigating the loss of the £20 per week, the department has bid for £55 million in the October monitoring. Should the bid be successful, costs will need to be refined to take account of timescales for delivery and any consequential additional costs, for example, IT development. The Minister has also been very clear that retaining the uplift will require recurring annual funding of around £108 million, increasing to around £200 million per year with the move to UC when all current legacy benefits are migrated. As retention of the uplift would be a break in social security parity and a cost to the Northern Block grant, it requires executive approval. As I've already mentioned, there will also be costs for operationalising the change here, such as IT and perhaps additional staffing. Committee will be aware from the October monitoring briefing that the Department of Finance have been notified of a potential bid in January monitoring for these associated delivery costs. In terms of a delivery mechanism for the uplift, obviously amending the universal credit system to only pay the uplift to Northern Ireland customers is the optimal technical solution. However, as I mentioned earlier, this is unprecedented. We have never asked DWP to implement the change to any of their benefit paying systems to enable a different rate of benefit to be paid in Northern Ireland. And while I have had exploratory talks with DWP about the possibility of separately identifying and paying the uplift to Northern Ireland claimants within the universal credit system, no formal request has or can be submitted until we have the funding to do so. If the Executive approve the bid to retain the uplift, we will of course work at pace with DWP to establish what is possible. However, I can tell you that this type of request would require difficult structural changes within the UC system, and I've been told that this could not be done quickly and will, as a Northern Ireland specific change, incur development costs. In addition to finding a technical solution within the universal credit system, we've also been exploring options for using other DWP payment delivery systems. However, there are no DWP systems that interface with the live UC system that have the functionality to issue recurring payments like the £20 uplift to all UC claimants. In addition, we've also been exploring the possibility of a local technical solution similar to the one we have taken with welfare mitigations. However, I can advise there are a number of quite difficult legislative and operational issues which would mean this would not be a quick or easy solution. For a local solution operationally, there would be a requirement to identify all of the universal credit recipients, calculate payment and make recurrent payments in each assessment period. And given that everybody's universal credit assessment period start and end date are different, increases the complexity of finding a local solution. As the Minister said during the debate on this issue, a local bespoke IT system to pay the £20 universal credit uplift would take some considerable time to develop, and costs are estimated to be in the millions of pounds. The legislation for a local solution could be complex to draft, and a disregard would be required. That disregard would require Treasury approval. So, as I have outlined, there are risks associated with all of these options, and it will take time to work through these and identify the most efficient and secure option. If the Department's bid is not met by the Executive, Minister plans to include the £20 uplift as part of the planned review of welfare mitigation measures. Of course, the implementation of any recommendations from that review will consider the budgetary, legislative and operational impact of each specific recommendation. And again, future funding allocations will be a matter for the Executive. Deputy Chair, I hope that was useful, and Anne and I are happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
Can I just check? Can you hear me now?
We can now, Anne. Yes,
we can. Hallelujah. It's the old solution of turning something off and on again.
That's always best,
anyway,
isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
If I can just start with questions there, Paddy. You talked there about the disregard. that has me concerned, obviously, because if Northern Ireland is doing something separate, then will Treasury agree to this disregard? Has there been any indications from them that they would enable the £20 as Northern Ireland would then pay to be disregarded from universal credit?
No, Deputy Chair, there's been no indication from Treasury that there would be any difference to the way in which the payment would be considered. Obviously, the easiest and most simplest and most straightforward way of retaining the uplift is through the universal credit system, which would mean there's no disregard required. But using the mitigations scheme that we currently have, or system that we have to pay the mitigation payments, then there would be a requirement to seek Treasury approval for the disregard.
Okay.
I don't know if Anne wants to say any more than that.
No, I think that we've already seen Treasury taking views in relation to other areas where we've been asked about disregards, and it's not easy, and it's certainly not a foregone conclusion.
If the decision was taken by the executive today, how long? I know this is how long is a piece of string, but how long do you think it could take before the £20 uplift Northern Ireland style could start to be paid?
It is a difficult question, Deputy Chair, and again, as I said earlier, that would be an unprecedented ask of DWP to change their benefit system to reflect a different standard allowance for Northern Ireland. I spoke to Neil Cooling, who's the SRO for Universal Credit in DWP yesterday. There would be, some difficult structural changes to be made within the UC system to enable that to happen, and it's something that wouldn't be done quickly. I think if we look at any local solutions, again, as I mentioned earlier, that would take some time to develop and introduce some more complexity in terms of the legislation. So it is unlikely that it is anything that we could do quickly. I think we would be very ambitious to even suggest that we could do something before the end of this calendar year.
Okay. Can I just check as well, Scotland do something different with their child disability payment. Is it like our mitigations? Is it a separate scheme, or does it go through DWP?
Yes, it is something similar, although it does require them to go through DWP, and it does require them to go through the legislative changes and for DWP to agree that. So whilst they have a different system for doing that, the £20 uplift ask to retain that from a universal credit perspective is something that we would need DWP to change within the national UC system, if I can put it like that.
I've asked enough questions of you guys at the moment. I have Andy and then Mark. Andy, over to yourself.
Thanks, Paddy. Thanks for your overview as well. Very in-depth and detailed as to the background of this. My reading of this is, obviously given the complexity, the need for legislation, the cost, the time frame, a local solution is probably not going to be the preferred option. It may be the default option depending on negotiations with DWP. Would that be the department's stance on this?
I think that's fair enough, Andy. I think what we've said is the optimal technical solution to this is getting the universal credit system revised to enable a different standard allowance to be paid for people claiming universal credit here in Northern Ireland. In some ways, that is the simplest solution legislatively, and probably from a resource and administration perspective. However, that doesn't take away any of the challenges that we would have in getting that change made. A local system requires much more, introduces much more challenges and difficulties in terms of legislation, in terms of building an IT system. The difficulty we would have is actually identifying the people in receipt of universal credit, and then finding a mechanism that will enable recurring payments to those at the end of each of their assessment periods, which we know from a UC computer system assessment periods aren't the same for everyone.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Very complex. In terms of both options, are you able to give any ballpark figure on a cost? I know the local solution, you'd said several million. What are we looking at here on each solution?
I really don't have any firm costs at this stage. I think you'll appreciate it. At this stage, we've been having really informal conversations with DWP on the possibilities and the art of the possible, I suppose. We haven't put any formal requests out because we don't have funding approval to do so. But equally, in terms of their development, I'm sure you'll appreciate that their time over the last number of months has been to develop the system to enable the uplift to be removed, along with all of the other priorities that they have in enhancing, refining the system. I haven't been able to get any ballpark figures in terms of costs, but as this is unprecedented, as it is a unique ask, as it is Northern Ireland specific, I would assume that those costs would not be minimal.
Okay, so the 55, 108 and 200 mentioned in the briefing document, October monitoring round, is solely the payment of the £20 uplift. There's no administrative costs built into that at all?
No, there's not. That's right, Andy. There's not. The 55 million relates to the 103,500 households we have here in Northern Ireland who are currently in receipt of universal credit.
We've no idea at this stage how much it will cost us to administrate it.
Again, it depends on the solution. If we get a universal credit solution, we may have development costs, but there would be no administrative costs with that because the payment would simply go through the universal credit system. If we were to develop a local solution, then the likelihood is that would incur additional administrative costs. And if we look at the system we currently use to pay the welfare mitigations, that probably uses somewhere in the region of 50 staff, maybe about a £2 to £3 million cost per year.
Okay, and the UC administrative system would be a lot more complex than that, though. So £2 to £3 million, we're talking, I think, a lot more if we were going for a local solution.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to mislead the committee by saying figures. I haven't received any ballpark figures for what it would actually be, but I think the estimates of millions is probably a safe assumption.
Okay. In terms of this, obviously we have lobbied quite intensely the UK government to maintain the uplift, which they haven't done so. When did work start from a department perspective on us picking up the uplift?
Well, as I said earlier, we know that Therese Coffey announced the uplift will be removed in July. We started talking to our colleagues in DWP. I belong to the DWP Universal Credit Programme Board, and my colleagues within the department sit on various boards within DWP. So we started having conversations with them around the end of August in terms of the what if we were able to, what would that mean, what would that look like, what are the complexities.
So work began at the end of August on this to look at us delivering a scheme, is that fair to say?
In terms of exploring with them the possibilities of retaining this, yes.
So
up until that point.
Exploring it, when did the actual work start in terms of scoping out delivery mechanisms, scoping out the cost, actually putting a request, no formal request has been made to DWP at this stage to administer the IT system?
No formal request at this stage, and all of the conversations have been on an informal basis to explore what the art of the possible could be within the universal credit system.
Okay, and when are we likely to know in terms of the 55 million bid? What are the soundings coming from finance in respect to that? A lot of pressure within the system. So I imagine difficult conversations with finance in terms of where they're going to allocate the October monitoring round monies. So what's the feedback coming from finance?
Well, I mean, we await the outcome of the October monitoring round, but I think we've all heard over the last week, particularly since the briefing that was provided last Thursday to committee, in terms of the funding challenge. And I think the First Minister last Thursday said that even if the executive had the funding to do it, we don't have the systems because it's administered by DWP. And if we don't have the system or the finances, then we need to be honest with the public. it will be for the executive to decide whether or not the 55 million is allocated. But I think the First Minister, along with Deputy First Minister and our Minister, continue to hold the view that this was for Westminster to make the right decision and reinstate the funding. I listened to the Lord's debate yesterday on the operating regulations, and again, a number of the Lords were again calling for the Westminster Government to reinstate the £20 uplift.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and the preference would have been Westminster to do it. It would have been the easiest solution, but it appears that they're not going to do that unless they have a sudden change of heart, and I don't see that coming, unfortunately. I'm just keen to nail down timeframes, and I appreciate it's difficult at this stage. So, without trying to box you into a corner here, local solution, highly unlikely we'll deliver it before the end of this mandate. Would that be fair to say?
It would be difficult. It would be difficult to develop a local IT solution and pass the legislation and get the technical solution that's required from a local system in a short period of time.
Okay. DWP, any soundings on time frame? 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, a year, and anything?
They haven't been keen to give me any timeframes, and as I mentioned when I spoke to the SRO yesterday, he again just reiterated that this is a difficult and challenging structural changes within the system that could not be done easy. I wouldn't expect on that basis, Andy, that we would have anything, a solution before the end of this calendar year. Okay,
and you said obviously with it being unprecedented change, have we any sort of similarities, not to the scale, but where we've asked for a change, we can say, well, that change took 3 months, it took 4 months. Have we anything to point to in terms of reference?
Yeah, I mean, we've never asked DWP to change their benefit systems or the UC system to enable a different standard allowance rate to be paid here in Northern Ireland. We have obviously in the past, from a universal credit perspective, sought differences in terms of fortnightly payments, etc. Yes, they were delivered as part of the development of the universal credit system. They did take some months to achieve. Our most recent ask was to ensure that we could get Section 75 data from the universal credit system, and that took probably 8 to 9 months to deliver.
So a simple change took 8 or 9 months. So
well, I wouldn't say it was a simple change, Andy. Again, that was a complex change for DWP to deliver because it was unique and specific for Northern Ireland.
You said several months for the fortnightly payments. What was the exact time frame for that, please, Paddy?
Sorry, it took several months. It wasn't 2 to 3, and I don't have the time scale, Andy, to hand, so I can go back to committee with that.
Okay, no worries. I'll leave it there, Chair. I've probably asked most of the questions. Apologies.
No, thank you very much, Andy. Mark, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Paddy and Anne for coming along. It's important that we got that briefing, as difficult as it was to hear. I think it's fair enough to say that we don't underestimate or haven't underestimated for a second the difficulty of the task that you guys have been tasked with, but neither can we overemphasise the importance of getting this piece of work done. Now, Andy focused heavily on what I was going to, just in terms of when work had started in this or when scoping had started. It isn't simple. Like I says, this is going to take a wee while. Obviously, it's a bit. There's something fair. We can't really say we should have started from somewhere else. We are where we are, and we're not going to see a sudden change of heart. In my view, as Andy put it, a sudden change of heart might be the Tory government actually getting one. Now, in terms of costs of setting up the system or establishment costs, I think it would be fair enough to say that if the 55 million bid is successful, which we hope it is, due to the delay in affecting legislation or getting payments out to people, that those costs could be subsumed into that 55 million. Would that be correct?
Well, certainly we have said to to the Department of Finance that the 55 million is based on the number of households currently in payment. The longer the uplift is not paid, the less requirement within that 55 million for the £20 uplift. We've said to DOF that there will be, if there are any development costs or admin costs, that we will come back with other bids in the January monitoring for those. So they are fully aware that this was the initial bid submitted by Minister to try and get the funding required for the £20 uplift. And we have also told DOF that in addition to that, we may be coming back for further bids dependent on the IT solution, development costs and admin.
Yeah, but as well as coming back with further bids, the department will be also surrendering some of the 55 million. One would imagine a hefty portion of it due to the delay in getting anything sorted or getting payments out.
And that's a conversation we'll have with the Department of Finance at that time, Mark, when we've refined those costs.
Okay, in terms of like local solutions and seeing what systems we might have or have had in place, I was wondering, and just off the top of my head, for example, free school meals or entitlement, surely we must have databases somewhere where we know where people are on universal credit. Was there any scope, and I hate to give you guys more work, where we could at least be looking at who's being hardest hit by this? Was it families with children or whatever? And is there a separate mechanism that can be deployed in the meantime to ensure that they're getting paid? Yeah,
the difficulty, Mark, is that there is no interface between systems and benefit systems outside of DWP, and even the current mitigation system that we use doesn't have an interface with universal credit. And in terms of the technical solution for that, that would require us to take a data development from the universal credit system, which would be at a point in time, and wouldn't capture everybody. And whilst local solutions are being explored, they do introduce additional complexity and risk in terms of being able to identify all of the UC claimants who are currently being paid. But what about those who then join universal credit after the date in which you take the data from the system? And it's enabling those to be identified. And whilst I'm not suggesting for a moment that this isn't technically possible, but even if it is technically possible, the difficulty we have is finding a local solution, an IT solution that will enable recurrent payments of £20 a week to match assessment periods, which are different for all of the people who are claiming universal credit.
Would it be easier to look potentially at, rather than the recurrent £20 per week payment, a series of one-off £80 per month payments?
I think there's a couple of things in that. I think any recurring payment, whether it be fortnightly or monthly, adds complexity to the solution that we need to introduce if it is a local solution. The other thing I would say about one-off payments are that whilst we've used systems in the past to do one-off payments, for this particular uplift, I think we need to be concerned, and I think we need to be just aware that one-off payments are okay, but they are also increased risk for those people who are most vulnerable, particularly if we have people who have addictions for drug or alcohol, and we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, no, I was conscious of that.
Sorry, can I just interrupt there? There's also an issue potentially there about disregards whenever you give somebody lump sums. Our favourite subject.
That's about it. Well, I know you guys are engaging with officials in DWP. I think it's probably important that we as a committee, an assembly and an executive are exerting what pressure we can on DWP at a political level as well. They encourage them as much as we can to be as flexible as possible here and as fast as possible as well. No, thank you, folks. It's given us a lot to think about. You have a lot to think about and a lot to do. So good luck with that. And I think it's important that you know that we as a committee be extremely supportive of you in this work. If there's anything more you need from us, certainly, I'm sure other members will concur with this. They're free to contradict if they wish, but to let us know, to flag stuff up with us as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And just to assure you that the work that we do with DWP and the relationships that we have with our colleagues in DWP are very strong, and they are very supportive of things we've asked them to do in the past. So it will be the governance route in terms of accepting a formal request and the prioritisation of that request in line with everything else that's being asked of DWP to change the UC system. But just to assure you, we have really strong working relationships with them, but I really appreciate the offer of help from committee members.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. And just to echo Mark's sentiments there, I think we all feel European. As officials, having to work through this, because if we weren't in a scenario whereby people were losing out and and feeling a sense of loss, people who need it most, then I think if we were having a blue sky thinking debate around universal credit, you would have to say that to deviate away from GB or UK-wide processes, then it would be bonkers. But I get the scoping work that you guys having to do. It was maybe mentioned before, but can I ask the question, are we sure, or have you guys had any dialogue with your counterparts in GB around repercussiveness and any penalties that we could incur if there was a challenge by any recipient in Liverpool, Manchester or Wales?
That's a fair question, Paul, and one that we are exploring. As you know, if we do anything that deviates from delivering a standard universal credit allowance, then there is the risk of challenge and the impact then of repercussive costs. And I'm going to ask my colleague Anne to give you a bit more detail on that.
Yeah, I think that whenever you look at the options that we've got, there is no easy solution. There's no obvious solution. I know that it looks very much as if DWP doing the IT to simply continue UC, but at the higher level seems attractive, and in many ways it is, but that probably carries the most risk of repercussion, because essentially then you've got a case of somebody in Newcastle, County Down, being entitled to a different level of benefit to someone in exactly the same circumstances in Newcastle and Tyne. And this is something we are aware of, and this is something that will have to be factored in whenever we're looking at all of this. In terms of the local solution, it's more like the situation with mitigations, where repercussion didn't really come into it because Northern Ireland had the power to do it and chose to do it and had the money to do it, and that was fine. But if we're doing something that is actually a different rate of UC, I do think that there are there are potentially repercussive consequences there, which we would need to explore in more detail.
Yeah, and that in itself is a scary proposition, I'm sure.
Yeah.
For you guys working through this, I'm sure it's like wading through treacle. It really will be. So, and I think that people have covered. I was a wee bit frustrated last week, I must say, with regards to the lateness of the papers, and I did ask around the scoping exercise when it commenced and when it's due to end. That's been covered today. I'm not prepared, I'm not needing to go through that. But what you did say that intrigued me today was that back payments will not be possible. So we are against, if you like, the clock with regards to getting people support that they have had and have used and enjoyed up to this point. So there is that sense of loss. But we've bid for 55 million. And what we know already is, and what was been said today, that the time it's going to take to try and get some sort of scheme in place to deliver that money down could take months. So I suppose that begs the obvious question, why did we bid for 55 million in this monitoring round?
Okay, so yeah, Paul, the reason why I suppose the bid came in so late was because I suppose we all, given the considerable outpour of ask from the Secretary of State to reinstate the £20 uplift, and our direction of travel has always been that Westminster should be responsible for reinstating the £20 uplift. When that wasn't going to happen, and we were absolutely definitive that it wasn't going to happen, we submitted a £55 million bid. £55 million bid was based on 103,000 households currently in receipt of the £20. But I think colleagues perhaps explained last week as well that once that 55 million bid was submitted, that it would be subject to further refinement when we had a decision from the executive as to whether or not it would be approved. So I suppose it was putting down a marker that this is the amount of money that we would need in this financial year to retain the £20 uplift. However, I think it was perhaps acknowledged last week that the bid would need to be refined when we had a decision.
So and again, I will go through this again. So if you're successful in the £55 million bid, that money sits there until you have the ability and the machinery in place, if you like, to draw it down. That works out, I think, my minimum works out about 2.2 million a week. So if there's no possibility of back payments, that 55 million every week diminishes, if you like. So by January, there's 12 weeks to the end of the year. That works out about 26 million of that. So just under half of that 55 million, if you're successful, will either have to be returned, or you could use that 26 million to facilitate and pay for the scheme. Is that the figure we are talking about to deliver the £20 a week down to the people who are receiving universal credit?
Sorry, but are you asking me, does it cost 20 million to adjust the system?
Yeah, will it cost something in that ballpark, 20 to 26 million? Because that's what you will have spare out of that 55 million. Would it take that to deliver a new system? Now, I take it you're through a scoping system, so you probably don't know the complete answer to that. But are we talking about multiple millions? Are we talking about 20 million to deliver a scheme rather than 2 million?
Well, I honestly couldn't say how much it's going to cost. And it would be unfair for me to make a judgment and say it's going to cost 20 or 10 million, because, as I've said, we've started the exploratory talks. We've had conversations and discussions with the DWP colleagues. Nobody has put forward any figure at this stage. And what I can say, it is complex. It will require structural changes within the universal credit system. It will take time to deliver. And on that basis, I think it would be safe to assume that it's going to cost, the development costs are going to be, are not going to be minimal. But I can't at this stage.
I get that. I'm not going to push you on it, Paddy, because you are still scoping it out, and it's a very complicated thing. You're waiting in treacle. I understand that. But can you answer me this? To deliver that mechanism, will it be a one-off cost, or will it be a reoccurring cost? Because we know how much per household, £20, and we know there's going to be 160, 200 going on. That's if you don't increase the households that needs universal credit for a start.
Yeah.
So that's an open question there, even in itself, how much we will need to spend on universal credit alone, the £20. But the actual mechanism to deliver that £20 into the households, will that be a one-off cost, or will that be a recurring cost? And if it's a recurring cost, well then it becomes a scary proposition, even more scarier than it is at the present time. Have we any idea where it's going to be reoccurrence or whether it's going to be one-off?
I think at this stage it would be a one-off development cost. But I think the question is fair, and in terms of what happens in April when we have the normal uprating of benefits, and given that at that stage DWP would need to be making changes to their system to upgrade the rest of the UK and do separate development for Northern Ireland, there is a possibility that that could incur further development costs. It is something that we will continue to explore and scope out with the Department for Work and Pensions. I think just to take that a bit further, if we were to extend the uplift to the end of this financial year only, then there is likely to be development costs that will be incurred to then remove the uplift from March, if that makes sense. So there will be development costs to make it happen, but there would also be development costs to retract.
So, final question, Chair. So, everything you've said, and we do manage somehow to get a scheme in place that can deliver this money down to our people. Forget about the threat to repercussiveness and everything that comes with that. What happens if DWP change their system? What happens if they make a political decision over there to do something, either reduce or increase? How does that fall onto our layered system?
I think what would happen, Paul, in the circumstances. So, if, for example, we received the funding and we're able to get onto the DWP work programme to change the Northern Ireland standard allowance. My understanding, my limited technical knowledge of the UC system would be that they would have to develop some sort of code that would be specific to Northern Ireland, and in effect then Northern Ireland would be running on a UC system for Northern Ireland only. Should DWP then make changes in the future to increase, decrease or change the functionality within the UC system, there would have to be a conversation with us at that stage to understand any implications that would have on the system that we're using in terms of functionality or standard allowance rates. And that's something that we actually do on a regular basis anyway. We have being part of the DWP board and being part of the DWP development side in terms of contributing what the Northern Ireland requirements are. We will continually reflect on changes that are being made to ensure that they are applicable to Northern Ireland or not. In terms of whether that incurs further development costs in the future, will depend, I suppose, very much on the implications on the DWP system.
Okay, I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ciara, you have indicated.
Fine, but obviously I'm new to the committee, Paddy and Anne, so first of all, thank you. Obviously, you were honest in the sense that there is no obvious or easy solution to this, and I commend yourselves and the department for exploring all the options. And likewise, I would be concerned regarding what repercussions would be open to us and setting up a new system. And obviously, as we've mentioned before, with regards to having to then seek, if we were to use some mitigation, you'd have to seek the Treasury approval to disregard it. So it is very complex and it's quite detailed. And obviously, as we're well aware, universal credit should have been increased a long time ago. It wasn't just because of COVID. So what I would kind of ask as well, obviously, Paddy, you mentioned that you work quite closely with EWP, you're on the programme. It's continuing to put the pressure on Boris, basically, to get this restored. That's where the answer lies, and that's where, in my opinion, it should be to the forefront, and that's where the team in the department should be working to. As you mentioned, even if we were to able to find the money, how complex that would be to actually get that system up and running. It wouldn't be retrospective. So it's not about trying to, for those that are struggling at the minute to think that there is an easy solution to this and things may be sorted, we must continue to put the pressure. I'm just reiterating, and I've done it in the assembly, as a team, and Paddy, as you're working closely with the programme board and with your counterparts, just keep where the pressure is, and we must constantly do it because it should be restored and it should be made permanent, and it was required a long time ago, even before COVID. So thank you both for quite a comprehensive overview of the situation that you are in. It's a quite difficult time for all.
Thank you, Ciara.
Thank you, Ciara. Guys, we have nobody else, but oh, sorry, Andy, you want to
Just
come
a
back
quick
in?
supplementary, just to pick up on the point that Paul had made in relation to the 20-odd million between now and the period of an operational scheme being in place. Is there any flexibility in the bid, the 55 million bid, to develop other support packages during that intervening period to support those that will be impacted?
I think first and foremost, Andy, we need to get approval for the bid. I think after that we would need to explore that with the Department of Finance. I couldn't give you an answer at this stage. My understanding is the 55 million bid was for the retention of the £20 uplift, and I think if you deviate from that, then I think that's a conversation that we would need to be having with the Department of Finance colleagues.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks, Paddy. Thanks, Anne.
Actually, that feeds into what I was just going to bring up as a sort of a final question. We currently have the system of discretionary support in Northern Ireland. Discretionary support is disregarded. If, as because we can't get access to the universal credit information, what happens if we flip it on its head, which is not what we want? We would prefer universal credit was made permanent, it was brought in by DWP, and that was there. But if we are successful in the bid of £55 million, we have a system of discretionary support where we say to people who are on universal credit, this is how you can access the money. Now, I do not want people to have to apply for stuff. It should be, as we all know, it should be coming to them. But rather than them not get anything, is there an option being looked at that through discretionary support that we can enable a payment for families who are on universal credit who are faced with those crippling costs that we know that they're faced with at the moment? Can we add? Can we add to the discretionary support budget?
So the first thing I would say to that is that you're absolutely right. We do have the discretionary support scheme. It's a unique system here in Northern Ireland, and is there to help and provide financial help to those who are finding themselves in a financial crisis or in need of urgent or short-term assistance. It isn't a payment system in terms of being able to or have the functionality to deliver recurrent payments, but it can, as you know, and has in the past. In fact, if we look at even up 2021, you know, it's almost 71% of the people who applied for discretionary support were successful, and it does help and provide critical support when people are in a financial crisis. To change the system, to flip the system, would require again legislative changes, and I'm going to ask Anne to come in on that particular question.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues with discretionary support is the criteria and the eligibility criteria, as I'm sure you're aware. And in fact, we have had an independent review of discretionary support, which is nearing its end, and I would hope that you'll be able to see the outcome of that in the very near future. But one of the things about discretionary support is that there are criteria around how many times you can apply, and all those changes would have to be made. We would have to make severe tweaks to the discretionary support system, and that will take legislation as well, and that unfortunately will also take time. So I'm not sure that discretionary support is the answer.
I'm just wondering, you know, when we're starting to think about people, and we have the bid in, the system through universal credit sounds as if it's going to be such an uphill climb that it'll take us 3 to 6 months before we could even get the payments out to people. So in the interim, if the 55 million is successful, rather than having to return the effectively £9 million a month not being able to be spent, it's finding other ways. I'm just guessing discretionary support, the criteria for discretionary support is at Northern Ireland's discretion. And that discretion, is that set by regulation or is it set by primary legislation? Yes. Regulation?
Regulation,
so that could be done by negative resolution?
That I'm not 100% sure of. I would need to check. But, you know, the thing is, you have to remember that we have the discretionary support ongoing review, and that will have consequences, and I'm sure depending on what the panel come up with and our response to it. we'll be pushing that through as well. So
I'm thinking
it's all
about
mixed.
If we were to think about from now until the end of the financial year, if Northern Ireland wanted to, that facility of discretionary support criteria could be amended until the end of the financial year, and then the review comes in, and whatever that system is beyond the financial year could continue on, because as we know, it does help people. It's just, I'm sure this is Granny, teaching Granny to suck eggs here. You're exploring every single possible opportunity of how we can get money out to people. It does look as if one of the barriers is, to be honest, paperwork. If we don't have access to universal credit, or who's on universal credit, then if there's a way that we can flip that round, that the universal credit recipients then can come forward. I hate people having to fill out paperwork, but
they can come forward at the minute. There's nothing to stop them doing that now anyway. If they're in that, if they meet the criteria, it's looking at changing it is another matter, and I would have to go back and just check on exactly how easy or difficult that would be. But it's not really. I mean, it would be a huge volume, I presume, of applications all coming in to a particular administrative process, which could be tricky enough. I mean, Paddy would know more about how the operational side of it would be. Legislation is what we would be dealing with.
Okay.
But I can come back to you on that.
The other thing I just wanted to ask you about is furlough. So we've had the end of furlough at the end of September. Anybody who's getting redundancy or who have a redundancy period to work through, we may not have seen those figures as yet. Is there any forecasting coming forward? Because that 55 million could significantly change closer to Christmas, just when people are coming out of their redundancy periods. Have we any forecasting on that, what that impact could be?
We had an initial forecast that was suggesting that there could be upwards of an additional 8,000 to 10,000 claims coming to universal credit, which was significantly lower than the forecast that we had this time last year. But I can tell you, Kelly, that to date we haven't seen any increase in demand for universal credit. Claims have not increased, and thankfully, and we're not seeing any information coming to say that there's going to be widespread redundancies. Obviously, we've recently heard the JMC mechanical construction redundancy of 100, and we'll do everything we can to support those people through the benefit system and with help and support to find job vacancies for them. But I suppose in short, there is a forecast which suggests that the UC number of people claiming UC could increase between 8,000 and 10,000. That forecast has not materialised. We haven't seen an increase in our claims to date. We keep a very close eye on this almost on a daily basis. And for those areas that are unfortunate enough to face redundancy, we have our redundancy services within the department to help and assist those people.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. To be honest, it's brilliant that we're not seeing the scary amount of redundancies that we thought were going to happen. We know already, of course, that a third of people who are on universal credit are already in work, so they may already be in the system, some of the people. But
yeah.
Anne and Paddy, do you know what? Keep going, keep beating on. We'll see what the monitoring round gives us.
Keep on trucking.
I know, but
yeah, I think that's perhaps the next step, isn't it? If we receive the funding or the bid successful, then I think it's probably at that time we need to shortly after come back to committee to say how we then progress, or what we're doing to progress the delivery of it.
Yeah. Has there been any formal written, are you aware of any formal written correspondence from the department or from the minister to DWP to ask them now to review universal credit amounts because of the increasing costs?
Well, as we said earlier, the minister has written to Therese Coffey on a number of occasions over the last 12 months, just again emphasising the need to retain the £20 uplift because of the dire consequences it has on families and vulnerable people. That's the extent of the written correspondence that I am aware of.
Okay, no, I just was wondering because of maybe now we need to be turning around and saying, okay, you have taken away the £20. What about you increase the base rate so that it's more affordable for everyone? But no, guys, thank you very much. It's a difficult time. I know that you're working really hard to try to bring something forward. We all know the numbers of people that we're talking about, and the families and the children and the people who are sitting at home struggling. The £20 was taken off them by DWP on the 6th of October, and we are trying. We're trying very hard to see what we can do, and we absolutely appreciate the work that you guys are doing on this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, we're moving now to agenda item 10, which is SL1, the Social Security Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. A copy of this SL1 is at page 147. The proposed rule will correct a deficiency in existing legislation.
I think it's better just putting up the nice photo, Ben, rather than a graphic onto it, isn't it, Bobby?
Oh,
Hello, Stephen.
Stephen, you need to be a mute.
I think Stephen's maybe muted now, is he? The proposed rule will correct a deficiency in existing legislation following EU exit and the end of the transition period. It amends the legislation in order to continue to make payments of the Christmas bonus to eligible people in Switzerland. The Christmas bonus is an annual payment of £10 made to people entitled to a qualifying benefit in the first week of December. Members, have you any comments, or are you content for the rule to be made?
Agreed.
Agreed? Agreed?
Yeah.
So that rule, the SL1 then. I don't need to read anything out like Paula has to do, thank goodness for that. Then we move now to agenda item 11, which is correspondence. You have this at page 151. The correspondence memo is at 152. I would draw your attention to page 269, which is a request from the women's sector to brief. Members, I propose that we invite them to a future stakeholder event. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Members, I'd also draw your attention to page 323, which is an invitation to attend a conference on the future of high streets. I propose that we ask a member of RAISE to attend on our behalf and report back. However, I know that RAISE are extraordinarily busy with bills and providing research papers on bills, but can I ask, are members agreed?
Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
Just members, I'm going to draw your attention as well. I haven't said this to Janice, so please don't have a heart attack. 256. It's the Coordinated Localism Community Development Networks. It's a bit like the women's sector. It was just to let you know, I met yesterday, not as Deputy Chair, just as me as a constituency MLA with one of the members of the Community Development Networks, just to let you know that in talking to them, they appreciate absolutely that the committee is very busy. But they are proposing that after a committee meeting that they would actually have a room here in Stormont where members can drop in and talk to their local community development network about the work that they're doing and about the paper that they have presented to you. Once I hear from them what the date of that is, I'll pass it through to the clerks so that it's in our papers for future. I'd also like to draw your attention to the correspondence in your tabled papers regarding the public consultation on intermediate rent, a new affordable rent product which intends to provide an additional rent choice for lower income households, providing more secure, affordable, good quality, well-managed homes at below market rents. The consultation will run from the 18th of October to the 14th of January. This was highlighted in the Minister's statement to the Assembly on the 3rd of November 2020 as part of the wider objectives of increasing housing supply and expanding housing options. A short summary of the proposals for intermediate rent is in your tabled papers, alongside a copy of the consultation paper. Have members any comments on that, or are you content to note? I'm not seeing anything. Content to note then. Any members on Starleaf want to bring any correspondence issues to the attention of the committee, or anybody here in the room have any part of correspondence that you want us to look at?
No thanks.
No problem. So are members content to action the correspondence as set out in the correspondence memo?
Content.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Then we move on now to agenda item 12, which is the forward work programme. Members, at next week's meeting we will commence our deliberations on the clauses of the Charities Bill. It'll be a busy one for us. Okay, and agenda item 13, any other business. Anybody has any other business, if you could indicate. I'm not seeing anybody coming forward with anything just yet. No? If that's okay, I might actually bring just one thing forward. I am aware, and we can maybe ask if it's okay with the rest of you, if we could write to the department for an update on a project that has been provided to them. It's called Fuel Poverty, the Perfect Storm, is just to have an update from the department, what their considerations is on that, and if they are intending to move that forward, or if it can or cannot be taken forward. I think that information then can spell out to everyone. Sorry, on you.
No.
Just are members happy that we write to the department just to ask for clarification on what way they're going forward in that? So it's Fuel Poverty, a Perfect Storm. Anya, sorry, you want to come in?
No, it was just the way I was sitting, Deputy Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, all right.
I was getting all excited there. If nobody else has any other business, then we'll go to agenda item 14, which I have the joy of telling you is Thursday the 21st of October at 9 a.m. is our next meeting. Another 9 a.m, folks. So that's that. Thank you very much. That's us finished for today.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland